Anson, are you going to sing for us on stream?
Yeah, I'll punish your audience if you want me to.
Yeah, I would love that. Get the piano out, man.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everybody for showing up this Saturday morning. It's Saturday afternoon for you, right, Chris?
Yeah,
Still Saturday?
6 p.m.
Okay, I've talked to some
6
Australians, and it's a different day for them, so I have to clarify. But today we will be having a debate between Chris Lestrange in the negative of is evolution true, and Anson will be arguing in the affirmative that evolution is indeed true. So if either of you want to introduce yourselves, go ahead, and I believe Anson will start.
Yeah, I'm just some guy who likes Mr. Westford, and I figured I'd offer him some charity and come on his show and provide some decent content that's humorous in nature.
Right, right.
And now he's punishing me by making me argue about how evolution is true, which I appreciate the punishment, and I will do my best to pull on the philosophical greats like C.S. Lewis and Immanuel Kant and J. Dyer in formulating my argument for why evolution is true.
Before we move on with Chris's introduction, I do want to say that this debate was formed because both of our opponents here asked for this debate to happen in, I believe, Jim Bob's chat. So anyways, let's, Chris, go on.
Yeah. So I'm Chris. I'm Chris. The
Chris.
fucking mustache man, as everybody seems to be referring to me. I was just stoked to debate Anson on this. I will obviously be against evolution, and then we'll delve into the weeds of what that actually means. So hopefully Anson can educate me.
All right, without further ado, and I'll only pop in if absolutely necessary, so you probably won't see me unless Anson gets really down and dirty and starts hitting below the mustache. But Anson, go ahead and you can start.
Yeah, so my argument for why evolution is true is pretty simple. It relies on something called the transcendental argument for God. So evolution is necessary for logic and morality. People use logic and morality, therefore evolution exists. And to break that down a little further, I'll say that evolution, like I said, it's a precondition for logic and morality. And logic and morality are both immaterial, like evolution, and universal. And therefore, logic and morality must be derived from evolution. And without evolution, logic and morality wouldn't exist, and we couldn't use them. And that is the entirety of my argument.
All right. So I would firstly say that we would then, if you're saying it's the precursor for logic and morality, you would have to display to me how you believe that evolution is responsible for that, because in my opinion of it, I would say that knowledge and morality comes from God and not from evolution, as I can draw comparisons between humans and animals to clearly demonstrate that that wouldn't be the case.
Well, so just so that I'm clear here, you're saying that God is your creator?
Yes, creator of everything.
Right. Okay. So I'm content with that. At the same time, being content with evolution being the creator, because that's really what we're arguing. In this case, you just have the opinion that evolution is the creator, and I have the opinion that evolution is the creator, and you have the opinion that God is the creator. But in terms of provability, it's not possible to assert that my creator is the true creator or your creator is the true creator. We can both agree that there was a creator. It just happens to be that mine is evolution.
Yes, well, so then we would dive into the processes of how this would be possible. So then, from an evolutionary standpoint, how you would get from chemicals and what like amino acids and small uh, like particles basically for that to initially then become life. So how would these steps occur from no life to life, and then you're also talking about the spawning of consciousness itself.
Yeah, yeah. The mysteries of life are akin to the divine mysteries in the church. Um, it's one of those things that people spend their entire lives endeavoring to understand and come to terms with because it's one of the greatest questions available. And for that reason, it's one of those things that requires an expertise level beyond what most people have attained. Therefore, I will do my best to entertain this subject, given its size and scope. Uh, I would say
I
that,
think there are
yeah,
I think there are
I'll say,
some
yeah.
easy things we can look at that would kind of lean it more into my favor possibly than yours as well. That's why I took this debate. So a couple of things like the complexity arguments for how this happened. I don't believe in the sense of evolution. If you leave something on a shelf long enough, eventually you have a human sitting there type of argument where I believe and that can be comparisons or examples can be drawn out of things we see. You can never go back to the start of this to verify it, but I believe we can look at things in our surrounding world that show that the complexity of it itself would suggest intelligence and not just per chance or a scale of time.
Right, and the infinite regress of the creator is what you're attacking here. What is my uh, reason for asserting that my creator is the one who will halt the infinite regress of the logic of my argument. And I'll just assert that um, my creator and the infinite regress ending is just as objectively true as yours is, and therefore I don't really have to stand on any sort of position, since my argument is based on you know the fact that I can use logic, and therefore evolution must be true. And you know getting into the weeds of how non-biological evolution creates biological evolution, and how the complexity of objects over time, given specific environmental conditions, create the evolutionary history necessary to transform an evolved object with the right scaffolding to transfer from a moment of non-living to a moment of living. I mean, that's like a 30-year evolutionary chemistry degree in order to be able to articulate that argument in a way that would even satisfy me. I can't. I mean, there's probably like 5 or 6 people in the world who could do that. So
So
I'll just
I would, yeah.
yeah, I'll just attack it from the philosophical perspective, instead of trying to get into pretending like I'm a scientist, because you can't make philosophical proofs about things like why humans are able to do what they are able to do. You can't make scientific arguments for that, because science is based in empirical knowledge, and not the root of what is a human, because not all objects achieve the level of complexity with the right evolutionary history and right evolutionary scaffolding in order to be able to ask what they are. And humans are one of
Yes.
those objects. And so I don't know if I could satisfy you with an explanation that would you know provide any
Okay.
sort of
So
usefulness.
so I would say that there is a reason when we would look in nature, or let's put it this way: if when humans came upon the pyramids, they didn't think that just randomly happened because of nature. it was deduced by looking at it that there is some form of intelligent design that took place to create that structure. So in the same way, I believe that we can look at the complexities of life on this planet and deduce that the probability of it randomly happening instead of having been designed is quite evident in most things that we see. As in, even with regards to evolution, if enough time takes place and you would get from chemicals and that to the spawning of consciousness, I believe there are things that have stayed constant forever and are still changing. So you would then look into things like crystals grow, but they're not alive. So these things never spawn consciousness. You can look at rare earth minerals in that sense. And these things would never spawn consciousness. We never see it in that sense, but we specifically see it in biological life. So how did we then, in the sense of with chemicals and these things, get to the situation of having biological life and living things, and then also the variation in species that we see?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. So there's a moment of non-biological evolution where you go from non-biological to biological based on the complexity and the history of the object. And so for example, like how did life happen, right? So we're carbon-based life forms. There are examples of non-carbon based life forms that have popped up on the planet Earth in primordial ooze type situations that are based on arsenic based life forms that have a double
Is
helix.
this confirmed?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's been studied by NASA with double helix structures and everything. So it just depends upon the environment and conditions of the non-biological evolution that determine what kind of evolutionary scaffolding creates the life type object. So it would vary based on
So
where you
you're
are and what
suggesting that
conditions you're in.
the environment is the precursor to what would
Yeah,
facilitate the evolution.
yeah, and the largest macro level of the environment is the universe.
Okay. But then the thing is, though, with regard to that, why do we see life in all different conditions or environments on this planet? So then where would so the what then? What is the most conducive environment? How did this kick off then?
Yeah, so that's a part of our scaffolding and the fact that not not all planets. If you're looking at just at our specific planet, yeah, that's true. But if you look in comparison to the vastness of space, it's actually quite rare for life to occur. There has to be a certain number of preconditions in the environment in order for the scaffolding to be built, so that when life is created from non-biological evolution, that there is enough ability for it to repeat itself and copy itself. That even in non-biological evolution, there are conditions that create copies of specific objects in the universe, and so it's just that
What do you
copy
see
process.
as non-biological evolution?
Well,
Can you
increasing
define what you
complexity.
mean by that?
Yeah, increasing complexity of objects over time.
Increasing complexity of objects over time.
Right, and so for example, if there's an area with gravity, the gravity pulls other non-biological
Ooh.
objects into it, and creates an environment where these non-biological objects interact with one another. And if the environment is acceptable, the objects are able to repeat themselves, copy themselves. Then over enough time, if there's enough complexity added to the scaffolding of these non-biological objects, there will be a moment in time in which there is a transfer from non-biological to biological evolution. We're not any different than a piece of dirt, man, or a piece of stardust. It's just our evolutionary scaffolding has
No, well,
advanced.
that's the thing. I believe we are.
Yeah,
This in the same way. Specifically, humans are different to other animals. Animals are different to plants, where there's a lot of variation that we see. So I believe we are different. I wouldn't agree to that.
well, we're different, but we all came from the same source, the same creator.
Yeah. Yeah, creator. So
Right.
you're basically conceding to my argument, Anson, because
No,
you're
I'm
specifically saying creator.
yeah, I am, and I'm saying that evolution is the creator, and you're arguing
Yeah,
that
but
the Christian God is the creator, and we so far I've seen no evidence that the Christian God is the creator. Therefore, I have not ceded any argument.
all right. Well, so with regard to that, you're specifically saying that okay, evolution is the creator. So but then if we break down evolution, as you have stated, it just points to the environment. So what is if the environment then is the creator in your sense, or as you see it, then ultimately where does that lead to? The universe being the creator.
Right.
Yeah, so then ultimately it would lead to God being the creator because of infinite regress. So eventually you would need to get to a starting point, which would suppose something that is eternal, and evolution wouldn't be the eternal or the starting point, because if you don't have something to start with, it cannot evolve. So that
Well,
would
I
be the
mean,
defeat in your argument.
simply making the assertion that God, as the all powerful, omnipotent creator, is the terminator of the infinite regress doesn't make it true.
What stating infinite regress is not possible?
No, stating that God is the one who terminates it with his existence. I mean, you just made that assertion without any kind of proof.
So, well, the thing is, you would ultimately. So the thing is, if you keep delving down the path of the infinite regress, eventually you would need to get to a starting point, right?
Well,
There would
yeah.
ultimately have to be a starting point.
Well, not necessarily, since we're using deductive reasoning. Axioms occur in deductive reasoning all the time that create these infinite regress situations. And since I'm arguing within the framework that is outside of empiricism, and I'm using the deductive reasoning that's popular amongst theists, then this is going to be a problem of our argument.
Well, but well, either or, something cannot come from nothing, right? So you would ultimately need an infinite something. So that's, I think, the problem that people get into with infinite regress. They go this and this and that created that. But ultimately, you would need something metaphysical that transcends time and space, as what religious doctrines, especially in Christianity, explain that is the nature of God, and not of a and you're stating that it is a predetermined situation of just environmental coincidence.
Yeah, I
But it
mean,
still doesn't give a starting point, and then it also doesn't even give the midpoint of consciousness and creation, which I believe documents dating back thousands of years do show. And if we even I'll even go further than that and go beyond my Christian beliefs. We have documentation even older. If you look at like the Epic of Gilgamesh and a lot of these texts that repeat the same story throughout time. So then you would also go into there's documentation that has lasted thousands of years that do explain the facilitation of God creating humans and the earth and everything that we know, an infinite being.
yeah, and as human evolution advances, the complexity of our methods of understanding our universe have advanced as well, and those terrific stories that hold a lot of value for humanity because they've advanced our ability to relate with one another, like Gilgamesh, like the Bible, Islam to whatever degree it is. Um, those methods of understanding
Not
are just features of evolution that sprung about because of the increasing complexity of how we interact with one another.
Yeah, well, but the thing is, saying that is a theory of evolution, it equates it to your theory of evolution. So it would, you could say it's a theory, but yours is also a theory. It
Right.
doesn't give more scientific credence
I
or
agree.
disprove God in any way.
I know I don't need to disprove God. I just need to say that in terms of my initially stated argument that unless you can prove the existence of God or I can prove the existence of evolution as the creator, then we're on equal footing,
Yeah.
and my argument is just as valid for evolution being true as yours is.
No, well, the thing is, you have the affirmative position of saying that evolution is true. So I'm here for you to convince me of that. And if I was able to demonstrate to you the existence of God, I believe I would have quite a big YouTube channel if I was able to do that. So that won't be the case. But the case is though that you would have to explain to me how evolution is the cause of life and how you deduce that. If you're saying the environment, because we've now established that the environment is basically evolution. So what is it? Environment times
Yeah,
time equals.
yeah. The micro environment is absolutely a result of non-biological evolution, but the macro environment exists and it changes over time. And you can't really argue with the fact that the environment changes over time, and no human can have the capacity or ability to know with certainty what came before. So I can't sit here and say what happened before the universe. From my perspective, that's like that's a fallacious thing to even consider. The universe simply is. The
Well,
universe is God.
well, okay,
Come on now. Evolution's
yeah, but no,
evolution's a part of the universe, man.
yeah, no. Well, I'm not granting that. I believe
Well, then
that
how are
that
you able
things.
to form arguments? We
Well,
already
things change. Yeah, things change over time, but saying that the cause of everything being the way that it is because of evolution and changes over time doesn't really say much. The thing is, we still have to get down to the bedrock of you saying that that it just magically happened. What I'm telling you is, from a logical framework, we can actually deduce that that wouldn't be the case. So if you think about Earth as a giant biological machine, it comes down to the precision argument. If you myself, I work in engineering fields and work with my hands. For anything, if you see it as a biological machine, for all of these components to perfectly work together to keep this whole thing running correctly, the scale and the mathematics of how that could just randomly happen is almost imperceptible. The fact is just of how cohesively everything works, that there's bacteria to break down smaller things. It basically indicates a giant biological machine, which
yeah.
would again be
It's
like what I said with the pyramid. Nobody goes out in nature, sees a pyramid and goes, wow, that must have just happened because the rain hit it at like different angles every year to carve the
yeah,
stone into a fucking
yeah. The
triangle.
the watchmaker argument. I like this one. So, um, you're saying that the biological reality of the complexity of our planet is proof that God exists because of its complexity and because it's so unique and beautiful and wonderful. And therefore, it must have had a mythical creator such as God to make it.
Not just not
And my
just that,
argument,
not just even its complexity. It's the fact that it all works together.
yeah,
You have a zoo with a lot of different animals that is highly complex, but it doesn't function in a sustainable way that could facilitate life, plant growth, oxygen creation, all of these physical things creating an environment over thousands of years.
yeah, man.
It's
No,
not a argument of complexity. It's an argument of the cohesive nature of how everything functions together as in a machine, as if it
yeah,
was planned.
yeah, and that's a really difficult subject because you're really doing a good job of explaining why um, the evolution of biological life on a mass scale is so rare in the universe, and why humans haven't really found it outside of Earth because it's the preconditions required for the environment to create enough copies of non-biological items that are self-sustaining, or not non-biological objects that are self-sustaining. Those constraints that are required to create a large Earth-like planet are they're so rare that we haven't even found it yet. So maybe
Yes,
we will one day.
correct. And
Yeah.
if we say I'll grant you, I don't believe it in the same sense as you, I'm sure, but I will grant you that the universe is this infinite thing with infinite planets that just infinitely proceed outwards. So if that were the case, and then environment, as we've kind of deduced through what your definition of evolution or God being would necessitate then that this occurrence would happen somewhere else as well, as we have, according to NASA and these sources, found similar planets that also fall into Goldilocks zones like Earth. So then, if this theory over time and environment is your conclusion for the creation of life, then it would basically necessitate it having to be on these other planets as well.
Well, it may be, yes, but we don't know. That's one of those things where ignorance of uh, information isn't necessarily ceding any sort of argument one way or the other. But humans have demonstrated repeatedly over generations that they can be ignorant of things that later generations know is true. So I'll just because I kind of feel like we're getting off track here, and I'll just circle back to my
All right.
original argument, which hasn't really been wrestled with at all, because you wanted to talk about the details of the scientific minutia, which are changing as humans develop higher levels of understanding their surroundings. That God, and evolution are on equal footing in terms of the transcendental argument for God, because there had to have been a precondition for logic and objective morality, and from my perspective, it's the evolutionary scaffolding created by non-biological evolution and the biological evolution that occurred when the complexity reached the critical mass necessary to convert non-biological objects into biological objects. And that scaffolding is what creates the logic and morality, and that humans are able to express in their understanding of the universe, and that evolution is immaterial, right? Evolution doesn't have something that you can touch and grab. You can only observe the effects of the evolution. And from my perspective, what I'm arguing is that evolution is universal. It's just generally something that occurs only at the non-biological level. And therefore
Yeah, I
humans
don't
get caught
even.
up. Humans get caught up in the biological evolution, but that's not where most of the evolution in the universe is actually taking place.
Well, I mean, you can say that, but the thing is, like, if you're talking about, again, you're talking about okay, I'll take it back to your first point. You were saying that morality is a consequence of evolution.
Right.
So if that were the case, why is morality only present in humans and not in everything else that we see? Why
Yeah.
doesn't other things follow moral structures? If it was the scaffolding of so you as you
Yeah,
said, the scaffolding.
and the object of human has an evolutionary history, right? We don't just spring from nothing, right? We had parents, and they had parents, and they had parents, and they had parents, and over a long enough period of time, we developed uh, the complexity necessary to be able to observe our universe using the gifts that are within it, such as mathematics, and we're able to deduce things like have this conversation right now because of all that evolutionary history that occurred in our object that created the complexity that humans are.
Yeah, but the thing is, animals have displayed tendencies to understand mathematics, so that's not really helping your
Well,
argument, though.
no, it is because evolution is doing the same thing with those animal objects that it has done with the human objects. And it's a
No,
perfect.
well, it doesn't. It's not a precursor for morality. Understanding mathematics doesn't is not a moral
Yeah.
argument.
Yeah, but well, they haven't reached the same level of complexity that we have, where we can have the same sort of relations. They're different objects, so they're going to have different features.
Okay, but they're not even close to us. They're not even close to us. So what I would say to that is, okay, we if you believe the numbers, they vary. They go from about 196,000 years ago, um, perfectly identical humans to us, same brain, same physiology, have been found. It even goes further. If you and that was there's a 233,000-year-old one found in South Africa where I live. There's one that's even 300,000 years above in Morocco, according to the dating, whether you believe in that or not, plus minus 50,000 years. So if we work on that logically, you're saying that 300, or let's even go 250,000 or 200,000 years ago, there was perfectly identical humans to us, same brain, same physiology, anatomy, everything. So how did the leap happen that we are so beyond everything else on this planet,
Yeah,
compared to everything else that haven't figured out moral structures? Animals have figured out tools. They figured out mathematics. We know the intelligence of certain animals is incredibly high. So why do they still not display morality if it is a consequence of the environment, i.e., evolution?
yeah. Well, we're both helped by our evolutionary history and also hindered by it. For the same reason that a tricycle isn't a bicycle. Those objects have a different evolutionary history than humans do as an object, and we have developed over time, an increasing complexity that's different than the other objects, and it's a part of each object trying to find its most efficient path forward, right? And who's to say now, it's a time thing, right? In 2,000 years, dolphins and humans might be having conversations. If you hadn't watched the whatever podcast, there's people on there that say they can talk to dolphins now. I think they're
I saw
nuts,
that
right?
lady.
I think they're nuts.
That lady. No, I think that lady did a lot of good weed back in the 70s. I think that's what that is, and too many psychedelics. But yeah, no, the problem is in that sense as well. That 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 is what I'm saying is the specifics of the creation. So if I take it back to theology, it would mean that the reason we are different to these other species is because our nature and us humans ourselves are created in the image of God, but that facility or necessitates us being the custodians of this planet. So that there is reasoning given to why we are different to other animals, which if it keeps coming back to environment and efficiency, that doesn't work, because there's humans that live in Siberia, like the
Yeah,
worst conditions. If it's about efficiency, why are there humans living in places where it snows? Everybody would just be living
yeah.
by a coast where there's fish and it's nice and warm, which we do not see, and we've never seen even throughout time, wherein survival was even more important. So I don't know if I would even
Yeah.
grant that.
Yeah, well, so evolution's kind of tricky. So one of the important components is creating copies of objects, so that there's that's what develops the scaffolding, so that the objects have the ability to spread around and then create more objects, right? So that there's enough of them around to create the complexity to develop that scaffolding. And I'll grant you that humans are very well adapted to many environments as a feature of their evolution. That's a terrific argument in favor of my position.
No, well, I would say that the adaptation of humans, it's, well, how is that a good argument for it? It doesn't necessitate the same results. It would mean that there's a specific difference that is not akin to um, optimization or environment. It's the same thing. If you take these tests have been done, right? You can take a plant from exactly the same phenotype as another, two identical phenotypes. Plant one, have it grow at the bottom of a mountain, and plant another one and take it to the top of the mountain. The one at the top of the mountain has a different completely different structure to the one at the bottom, even though it has exactly the same phenotype in exactly the same generation. Not because of selective breeding, just physical environmental changes facilitate a complete adaptation, but not evolution. How could it ever evolve?
Yeah. Yeah.
It is
Different.
within its same lifespan. You can it defeats the argument over time and environment. Environment causes adaptation in certain species that we can observe. Evolution we do not observe.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I go back to it being, evolution is an immaterial process. Much like your God and much like logic and morality, they're all immaterial, right? They're not something that you can reach out and touch. They're just observable. And I'm not refuting the existence of your God in my argument. I'm just saying that it's comparable, right? And in terms of the adaptation, those plants that you were referencing, they have, like I've mentioned, they have a different set of uh, preconditions, a different evolutionary history, and so their ability to adapt to different environments would be different than a different object, a human, to have such a drastic adaptation within its own lifespan.
Yeah, so I'm basically arguing for what causes adaptation and changes in species, as in an intelligent designer, and you're saying it's just the environment. So it comes down to that same silly thing.
Well,
If I go stand out in the sun for 2 hours and I get a tan, did I evolve or did
no,
I adapt to
absolutely,
my
absolutely
environment?
not. No, that's ridiculous. Why would somebody say
Yeah.
that?
So exactly, that's what I'm saying. It's not an environmental case uh, that I believe facilitated the creation of all life. It's something that designed things to adapt over time to facilitate survival.
Yeah.
In,
Yeah. No, I could see that's a really good argument and completely comparable with mine in every way, because the evolutionary history of the objects will determine their ability to adapt in an environment, just like your God's design creates the necessary framework for how the objects in the universe exist. So, I think we're on equal footing on this one.
yeah, well, no, but I'm more stating in the sense of the fact that things adapt or change or build scaffolding is because of intelligent design.
Mhm.
The thing is, you would have to display why that is just happening by random chance.
Well, no, I
Again,
don't.
back to my argument of a machine.
Okay, so I'll do the. I don't like doing this. I'll do the watchmaker argument. So you have, and this is, I don't like this argument. The You've made the assertion that there must, and hell, these objects in the environment, from your perspective, the objects that you've observed, had to have had a creator from your perspective because of the way that they were designed. Right. So you're making an assertion that there was a design, which I disagree with, but I'll grant for the sake of this argument. Um, you have therefore said, well, then the designer, which you made the assertion is in existence, um, had to have been, a god, right? Your god. And and I'm
I'm
saying I'm
saying,
saying I'm
yeah,
saying that therefore your God must be grand and wonderful and complex, even more so than the objects that he designed. So who created your God?
uh, infinite thing does not need creation. The
Right,
infinite being would not necessitate the creation.
right.
It is it's
Right.
difficult because we're delving into metaphysics. So it's that same thing of we sometimes cannot wrap our head around something being infinite, as we are bound by physical space and time and dimension. So it just is the facilitation of something that is beyond that.
Yeah, and that's a similar problem that I was running into a minute ago when we were arguing the origin of life in terms of evolution, because you get to a point where there you have limitations as a human for understanding the things like what you were just saying, in terms of the complexity of the infinite nature of your God. Just like I have difficulty understanding the infinite nature of the universe and the evolutionary processes that went into play to create the objects that we are. So we have a similar problem in our.
Yeah, but I don't know. See, that's the thing. I don't grant that. The thing is, I don't grant that it's just this little progression of now we're very hairy monkeys and now we're non-hairy monkeys. It's the same way I don't grant creation necessitating God. I believe ultimately God created everything, but I'm a human and I can create things. That doesn't mean I'm God. So that's it. I don't think that works. Again, I'm going to say, so my argument is basically, if coming from looking at Earth as a biological machine, it shows us that somehow every little piece works together. There's a system for cleaning the planet, as in the mycelium system that runs through that. Some of the hippies have said is basically Earth's internet. So how then, if that is the case, Earth basically has its own communication service through the mycelium in the ground. It has the things at the top that break down bigger things. So there's biological sieves happening. You're talking the complexity of how it works together facilitates intelligence or a design and not something just happening by chance.
Yeah.
So that would be my argument.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean,
And we can observe this,
yeah,
and we can test this as well.
yeah, and I granted, your presupposition that because something is complex, it must have had a designer. And then when I asked you to explain why your God didn't have a designer, you fell back on, well, the God is infinite, and therefore I can't justify it. And if you don't have to justify it,
I'm not
then
stating complexity facilitates a designer. I'm stating that complexity facilitates something being highly improbable. That's
right.
what I'm stating.
Yeah, and I agree with that. That's why there's not life on every planet in the solar system. I agree with that. There's just a lot of non-biological evolution. That makes
But
complete
like
sense.
you said, if it's environment plus time that facilitates evolution, and we then say, okay, well, they have these other planets, but into Goldilocks zones, they have biological water on them, all of this, then it would necessitate evolution happening there as well, or life happening there as
Yeah,
well. We
you're
still
right.
struggle with the situation of how did we get to the varieties in species through all different variations, even in similar environments, which that also kind of defeats the argument. Like even if I just look at the ocean, there's different types of species in the ocean. So the environment did not facilitate equal evolution in these things. They, these arguments can keep being made. It doesn't really work with the whole with the environmental change that would cause something to now become a different thing,
Yeah,
and
it's
then consciousness, life, all of these, and varying species coming from that.
yeah, it's interesting. I mean, why would you make an argument that for some reason the life in the oceans need to be equal in some way? It makes absolutely no sense.
Well, you said
And
it's the environment, right?
right,
So the
yeah,
environment would then
yeah,
necessitate similar
yeah,
evolution. If it's spawning from the same seed, you
right.
might get even with plants where like I'll even grant you most of it, saying that there might be minor changes in the phenotypes of the plants. It's still not going to be you're not going to fucking grow a Christmas tree and then all of a sudden a cabbage patch pops
Oh,
out, dude.
yeah, no, I agree. The evolutionary history of the object would dictate that. But even in the universe, let's take it out of the sea and look at the non-biological evolution of the universe with a similar light. None of the planets are identical. It's a feature of the environment that different kinds of objects exist based on the specific constraints and the microenvironment that within which the non-biological and the biological evolution occur. And the propensity for evolution to create that scaffolding with all these different objects inside of it, that eventually becomes a scaffolding large enough to create biological life that sustains itself with enough copies. I mean, it's the same. I completely agree with
Yeah,
you.
but
I
you're
mean, it's
granting
highly
yourself
improbable.
copies and all of these things just happening, but I'm not really hearing how that is happening. So like
Yeah.
firstly with copying, like is it a gathering? I'll even grant you is a gathering, or things just sticking together randomly. How you granting yourself the scaffolding, and then how that even facilitates how it would work,
Well, I guess
as
I'd
in logically thinking how that
yeah.
would work.
Well, I guess I would just do it the same way you did by explaining the nature of the designer of the universe, and that it's the infinite is difficult to understand. Therefore, I'll take the intelligent
I don't
design
believe it
argument.
is that complicated to understand.
Well, it
I
is.
believe
It's
I
very
believe if we
very
have an ego
complicated.
about things, they become complex to understand because we don't sometimes accept very logical explanations for things, or just use logic to
Oh
deduce
yeah,
things. I don't think that it's
yeah.
all that complex. It's in the same way with my argument, right? If I see a beautiful vegetable garden, I wouldn't come across that and think, oh wow, that naturally just happened because all of these different foods just grew here together over time, or just because this is a really nice spot that has nice lighting and there's a subtle breeze hitting this little valley here. No, you would look at that and understand that, oh, something with thought actually planted this, i.e., a human. It was created. It is not something that just randomly occurs. It is something that would have to be planned. And it's the same thing again with variation and the complexity.
Right.
It doesn't even have to be used to make an argument for God. It can just basically be used to destroy the argument of the environment facilitates
Well,
changes in these things,
well,
because you would have to display that, because then you would have to draw correlation between these things being similar in similar environments, and as I've said, that's not the case. There's elephants in Asia, there's elephants in Africa. It's not similar environments, dude. There's woolly mammoths that lived in ice. It's not a similar environment, but they basically look the same. So
yeah.
what happened there?
Yeah, and there were prehistoric elephants that lived in Alabama. Where I am. That look, just because there are lots of different copies of objects made that have a different evolutionary history over time doesn't disprove that my theory at all. You're just stating features of the evolution. And in terms of any argument or assertion for design which you haven't been able to prove, other than relying on the fact that God isn't knowable because he's infinite. I'll just use that same argument for evolution. Evolution, the source of
No, well,
evolution,
I
isn't
have.
knowable
I
because
have
it's infinite.
given you examples of physical things coalescing and working
Right.
together in a homogeneous way that doesn't seem to make sense. I'm not even going into. We don't even have to go into all of that fanciness. I'm saying
Yeah.
things work surprisingly well. And if you're saying, you keep going back, because I asked you at the start, you said your ultimate creator is evolution, and that would be the, I'm not. I mean, that was a silly argument, but morals, and then also what the environmental changes that
Right.
spawn from evolution, which I don't grant that, and you would have to prove that the environmental changes necessitates species adapting and evolving. As I've said again
Well,
with the animal argument, or the human argument,
no,
if you
no, I
grant
don't. I
the
don't because evolution is immaterial and universal, just like your God. So he's the end of the infinite regress that you're trying to desperately grasp at.
No, well, I defeated that already. I told you. The thing is,
No,
your God is an endpoint to the infinite regress. If you
so
say
is evolution.
evolution is God, then how? Where does the stuff come from that evolved? If the evolved is the God, you're missing your pre-step, dude.
Yeah, no, the
Which that
precept
disproves your
and
argument already.
no, but just because you don't understand the non-biological evolution, and you don't appreciate it or have the same belief structure, doesn't make it wrong. I mean, I can totally understand from your perspective why it would look strange, even though you've repeatedly stated features of different types of evolution among different objects. different evolutionary history. That all seeds.
I've
argument.
stated adaptation. I've stated
Right.
adaptation and things morphing and changing. Like I said again,
Yeah, different
if I stand out in the sun for 2 hours, I did not evolve to have brown skin. I got
Yeah.
fucking burnt by the sun, dude.
Yeah, that's a feature of the environment for sure. And
Yeah,
the
that's a feature
constraints
of the
the object
environment,
that
but
is, yeah, the object that is human burns when he goes out the sun. I do. I'm pale as a ghost, man.
yeah, but I didn't change. I adapted to my environment, but I didn't become a completely different thing. That's
Yeah.
what you are claiming, is things became different things because of the environment.
Yeah, over time.
Over time, how much time though? Because as I've said, if
Yeah.
if you grant
Humans
the
are
dating done on biologically similar humans, you're going back 250,000 years on the estimates.
Yeah.
Even taking off 50,000 years, like you're saying 250,000. So what would we have to? If it's similar in 250, let's use logic and math. If you're saying similar in 250,000 years, so what would then facilitate 1% of change? If there's no
okay.
percent of change
Yeah.
in 250,000 years, when over a million, is there like 1% change? And then if you do the math on that, going, okay, in a million years, there's one or 0 point, or okay, I'll give you one. Let's say 1% change in the humans. Now we're a little bit different. Okay, now we can see the changes. Then you would need to facilitate all of that going back through monkeys, mammals, things coming out of the ocean, and then even getting back again further into immaterial, where there was even no life or consciousness, and things were just little microscopic atoms that somehow started copying themselves and then became self-aware somehow just because of changes in the environment.
Yeah, no, I agree that the complexity is vast and almost not understandable because of its vastness. You're describing the scaffolding, right? And trying to look back into the past and see, where did this object come from? How did this object come into place? How did this object come into place? When we don't have the history to be able to know all of that. And in terms of the variation and adaptation between humans, I mean, it's pretty self-evident that there's plenty of adaptation and variation between humans even existing on the planet
I'm
today.
showing you from the evolution point of view that just the math doesn't even work out in you guys' whole theory of this. It doesn't even work out. So that's what I'm doing. I was granting you that and just saying that even mathematically it doesn't even work out, because if you keep going, oh well, what's the answer to this math problem, and then you go, well, I'm just going to keep adding numbers to it, you're never getting to an actual answer. So then it's
Right.
not math, then you're basically just doing a fucking collage of numbers.
No, you're just elaborating the infinite regress problem of the deductive reasoning we're using in this argument, because I'm using a theistic argument that relies on deductive reasoning, and axioms are inherent in those style of arguments. I agree that it's a problem. The infinite regress problem, which neither one of us have been able to satisfy one another as to the answer to, and you're just
I don't have to, like I said,
you're just
I don't
displaying
have
it
to
in
prove
larger
God
terms,
to
in
say
terms of
that.
specific details of the regress.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't have to disprove or prove God in the sense of you in your argument of saying, well, I'm on the side of evolution being God. Then you still sit with the problem of the precursor to what facilitates the stuff that changed. You are not even arriving. It's not even at infinite regress, dude. That would even be better. You have a you having a stopping point where there is a clear point to that that's already disproving what you're saying.
A clear pre-point. You mean, like, you're saying that because I'm asserting that the universe is infinite, like your God, that there's a problem with what I'm saying? Well,
You're facilitating creation necessitates the things changing because of the environment. So you would
right.
still need to get things that would start to change.
Well, no.
So what are the things then that would be
Yeah,
God by effect?
yeah. So there are physical preconditions of the universe, like matter and energy, right? So I mean that they simply exist. Do you not agree that matter and energy simply exist?
Yeah, but it's not even that. It's the okay, changes are because of the environment. Where did the fucking environment come from?
From the
So
matter that
again,
the matter and energy are the environment. We are humans are the environment.
we're not an environment.
Yeah, we are. We are just as much the environment as any rock or mountain or Pluto.
Rocks are environments now. Anson, you're grasping now.
No,
You're
I'm not.
grasping. Oh,
Rocks
rock
are the result
environment.
of non rocks. Any object is the result of non biological evolution in terms of its current form.
So, dude, but the whole thing with that is like it's kind of that to me is a silly argument. That's like going, oh well, okay, so a river is alive because there's living things in it. Rivers can evolve and have small rivers. So is that what you're telling me?
Well,
We're just gonna add that to rivers also evolve over time and have little baby rivers that are gonna change and become oceans eventually.
well,
Is that
a river is a feature of the non biological object known as Earth.
of the?
Yeah, Earth is just a non biological object, right? It has biological objects on it. The moon is a non biological object. It had an evolutionary history.
No, well, it changed over time. I'll grant you that, but I still, in my theory, hold to adaptation being a thing, as
Right.
we see with sunburn and all of that. And I'm saying the how adaptation even happens is it facilitates something smart enough to suggest that things would need to adapt because they live in environments that change, not the environment creating it. You again, I'm saying you have this point, and I'm saying I'm taking it back further, which you seem to not realize that you're not
Right.
doing.
Yeah, you
You're kind
seem
of
to
stuck in the middle,
yeah, no,
giving yourself the middle and not going
you seem to
telling me
think
what the start was.
yeah, you seem to think that for some reason humans are different because they're biological objects in some meaningful way other than complexity, right? And I'm just saying that humans are more complex objects than non-biological objects, or even objects with a different evolutionary history. Just because we're different objects doesn't mean that I don't know how to I don't know how to bridge this gap because it's like we're talking past each other.
No, well, the point is just again, if you're the affirmative position here, so that's again what I'm asking you to display to me
Right.
is what environment facilitates the creation of consciousness? Because that's what this ultimately gets down to, because we all can perceive things change. I mean, a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. That's not the point. That's a metamorphosis and adaptation because of time and environment and age and all these things. But again, I'm asking you to basically establish to me then if evolution, daddy, made all of this, and evolution also gave us our morals, like you stated,
Yeah. Oh
then
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. They evolved. Yeah. Well, I don't understand what you're saying. Look, I've already gone down this rabbit hole where I explained that I have you know determined that we both use logic and evolution is the precondition for logic, and logic is immaterial and universal, and therefore logic and morality must be derived from evolution. I don't understand.
again,
I mean, you're using logic
again,
right now, right? How are you able to use logic without evolution?
without evolution, how
Yeah.
am I able to use logic? Well, consciousness.
Right. Yeah,
The,
that's
the
an excellent evolutionary trait.
the mind that does not appear to be shown in other animals that they have morals. Again, as I said earlier in
Right.
our conversation, display to me where morals come forth in animals. And if morals are a cause of evolution, then everything would have morals. So you're kind of defeating yourself in making that statement
Well, no,
because it's not
I'm,
in anything except humans.
yeah. So our evolutionary history as a human object is different than the evolutionary history of other objects. It doesn't mean that other objects in the universe are incapable of using logic and reasoning and have morality. It's just that we're not aware of them, right? So
Well, I'm asking
simply
you.
because the preconditions for the transformation of non-biological life into highly complex biological life like humans is so rare doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Well, I'm asking you for how, and you just keep granting yourself that it does.
Right. I'm using
But
I'm using the theistic argument for evolution. That's what theists do all the time
just
for
just granting
right.
yourself stuff without needing to explain it.
Right. I'm arguing like a
That
theist.
seems to be the trend that's going on lately. Is I just grant myself all of this
Right.
shit that I can't explain, but it's just how I feel because I'm a little bit hungry or what's the
No,
I mean
I'm using the same design argument that you did for what designed the universe. It's the same thing you just did.
no.
Unless you
No,
want to defeat your own argument,
I gave you
fine.
actual reasons for biological serves a cohesive. I mean, an environment itself, the fact that it can maintain its environment and facilitate then life and species and multiple generations of animals that can flourish in that environment would already necessitate. Oh fuck! I lost my point a little bit, but would actually facilitate. Ah, fuck! I lost my point now. Damn it! Damn it! I lost my point there. But yeah, it would facilitate in the environments that you would see similar things in similar environments reacting similarly, if that makes sense. So you can just on the basis of looking at this thing like a machine from an engineering point of view, no fanny foo-foos, metaphysics or anything, you could say, wow, it's amazing how all of these things perfectly work together, from fuel sources to serves to all of these things working exactly in together in multiple different environments just by chance.
Right.
You would have to
Why do you keep
you would
saying
have to
why do you
display
keep
how
saying
it's just
chance?
accidental and not an indication of something that is very adapt to basically being a biological computer, which would necessitate a form of intelligence and not coincidence.
Right. Right. And you can make those assertions that there's a designer, but when I ask you who designed the designer, you get the same problem that I do in that the infinite is difficult to comprehend, and therefore you can't really explain to me the mysteries of what God is. And just like you do, I have the same problem where there are a lot of mysteries involved, and humans don't have all of the information available of the infinite that is the universe. And so, we're going to keep having the same problem since I'm using the theistic argument.
So basically, dude, no, but the problem is again, you would make a better argument if you actually said evolution is also infinite, or it is a immortal thing. But the problem is because we can define evolution, or you are defining it as an environment and these things, again granting it physical structure, you cannot appeal to metaphysics when talking about a physical thing, where theists can, because the topic of God, or the infinite, is metaphysical and
No,
not metaphysical.
I've already said that evolution is immaterial and universal, and you've also made the claim that God designed all these things that are material. So we're on equal footing in terms of me still using your design argument for why I'm correct in this situation.
That doesn't
God
equate.
and evolution are on equal footing in terms of this argument. So you'd have to deny
No,
the
it doesn't
existence of
equate because
God in order to deny the
one
existence of evolution.
no, it's not. One is a physical thing and one is a metaphysical thing. So then how, like again, and then you're also using a physical thing to explain how metaphysical things evolve,
Right? Yeah.
which you kind of go, well, I have a
Yeah.
cake and I'm going to turn it into flour. How's that a good argument, dude?
Well, metaphysics are, part of the evolutionary scaffolding. They definitely were created by evolution.
Evolution itself would need something metaphysical to be created. So you again not realizing how you're starting in the middle and not thinking about you would to solve the infinite regress problem, you would need something metaphysical, immortal, eternal. You cannot appeal to something that is
the
physical
universe.
as an
The
environment
universe.
because you're
The
granting
universe.
yourself the temerity of environment.
The universe is immortal, and evolution is immaterial and universal, like God. And those are all of the same conditions that you're requiring for my argument. So I don't really understand where you're losing me here.
Well, you're granting yourself the universe already, which is again a physical thing and not metaphysical. So you're just doing the same thing though, and just changing the
Right.
name.
Just like you're granting yourself a designer. I'm doing the same thing you are. I told you this is the
No,
theistic argument for evolution.
No, this is a logical argument for it. The thing is to have eternal would facilitate something non-biological or non-physical because otherwise it would deteriorate. You keep granting yourself the universe, things and stuff that keep changing,
Right.
but how does that then facilitate
Well,
the metaphysics of mind and laws of nature and all of these things, the regularity of nature? You're
Right.
granting yourself all of this stuff, just doing all of this insane stuff where it's physical things that we can look at, like you said, environment, which is like a very basic thing. So how would that be an argument? I don't understand how you're seeing that as an argument.
The complexity of the nature of my creator and designer evolution is thus. I mean, that's I've explained this to you. I don't know how many times. I feel like I'm repeating myself. You want to take a break for a few minutes? Let Mr. Westford come up here and do something with a short intermission, because I kind of feel like we're talking past each other.
Okay, well, is there anything either of you want to say? Do you want to say anything, Chris? I can open up to the next portion, which would be having callers come in. I'm going to go ahead and leave the link here.
What's that?
Do you want to do call-ins and then we don't go to 120?
Yeah, well, we'll go to 120, man. I just feel like we've reached a point where we're just talking past each other, and I don't want to give the audience. I'd be happy to continue. It's up to you, Chris.
Yeah, no, I'm good either way. The thing is still like we keep talking past each other because you're finding yourself in like fallacies where you're not explaining. Like I'm giving you concise reasons for things, and then you seem to be just granting yourself stuff. So that's why it becomes circular.
Right, and I'm just doing the same thing that designers do, and granting them that that the universe had a designer, right? And there's no backup. There's no backup for why that is. So I'm just using the theistic argument for evolution. Yeah, unless you want to disprove a designer exists, then we don't really have to have the conversation past any point where I've stated.
If anybody wants to join in, I will let you in. I'm gonna hop off camera, but yeah, open it up to callers now.
Yeah, but the thing is, like I said, what is different in the argument is I asked you again, because you're the affirmative, you would have to show the physical cause of evolution, i.e. environments that are capable of creating a cohesive system, which is basically impossible. And like I said, I wasn't even going with the God argument. I was saying nature itself shows that things don't really change that much over time.
Yeah. My buddy Jim Bob. What's going on, Jim Bob?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, man.
Well, two things. Anson, you keep saying that evolution is immaterial.
Right. Yeah. It's a process. It's not. It's
Wait,
not
hold on.
mysterious.
Stop right there. Are processes physical?
Processes can involve physical objects. Yeah.
Can you tell me any process that you're referring to in evolution that isn't physical?
Well, yeah. I mean, the process of the complexity of morality, the logic, preconditions of the universe.
Wait, no, evolution doesn't make claims on logic and morality. Evolution is a claim about biological processes that follow
No,
certain laws that
no, not
produce
no.
variety.
No, you're talking about biological evolution. I'm talking about non-biological evolution and biological.
Okay,
evolution.
did logic evolve then?
Did logic evolve them?
Did
Yeah, I mean,
did-
I'm fairly confident to say that logic is a part of our evolutionary scaffolding, but I'm not comfortable saying exactly at what point.
Okay, then
It
you're in a
existed.
contradiction, because you said before that evolution is a precondition for logic. Can you have evolution without it abiding by the law of identity?
No, absolutely not.
So then your statement that evolution is a precondition for logic is false,
Why is that?
because evolution needs to abide by the law of identity. That means the laws of logic are a precondition for your view of evolution.
Yeah. The creator, evolution. Yeah. So I agree with that. Logic and morality are
I'm not
immaterial
talking about
and
morality.
universal.
Again,
Yeah. Well, yeah.
listen,
It's immaterial,
Anson,
just like logic.
Anson, you're not getting the contradiction here.
Okay. Yeah. Explain it to me one more time.
Did you not say evolution is a precondition for logic?
Yeah. Evolution is the creator. Absolutely.
Okay. If evolution is the precondition for logic and evolution is a process, right? How do you have a process without logic being the precondition for the process?
Yeah. That's interesting. It may be a part of the environment that simply exists in nature, the natural environment, the universe that is universal and immortal. So
Okay,
you're right.
so
Yeah, it might be a part of the nature of the creator that I don't understand.
okay, how does a process produce metaphysics?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I have an answer to that.
Well, I mean, if you're positing that evolution is the God, then you're going to have answer to that.
Well, yeah,
because-
evolution's the God in terms of biological life, because of all of the non-biological scaffolding that existed prior to the creation of biological life.
What's the
in evolution.
non-biological scaffolding?
The non-biological. So you have the existence of the universe, right? It is infinite.
The universe is a metaphysical.
Right. Yeah, everything comes from the physical universe, Jim Bob.
Wait, well, what's the universe, though? I asked you, what's the justification for metaphysics, and you said metaphysics.
Right. Yeah. So
that doesn't make sense. You can't. If I asked you, how does evolution produce metaphysics, and you say the universe, well, the universe is a metaphysical claim.
Right.
I'm asking you for how metaphysics are mind dependent. You said said evolution is immaterial, universal. Universals are mind dependent.
Right. Okay.
So what's the mind in evolution if you agree those things are mind dependent?
So your assertion that universal is mind dependent.
Yeah.
I really don't know how to agree with that.
Can you give me an example of a universal?
Well, yeah, the universe is a universal. It exists.
No, hold on. The universe is a collection of things, right?
It is everything.
Is it a collection of everything?
Yeah.
Okay, so if the universe is a collection of everything, without a mind, how did you put particulars into a folder called everything?
Well, you're making an assertion of a designer.
No, I didn't say anything about that.
Yeah, you said, how did you put that? That implies a designer.
Yeah, you, Anson. How did you place particulars in a universal category? That requires induction.
I
right?
did that. Yeah, I did that. I did that using logic. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, so how did an immaterial process called evolution give you an logic, a metaphysical mind-dependent category?
That's an excellent question. Maybe I don't understand the full nature of the designer of the universe that is evolution.
The designer? Are you saying that evolution has intent?
Yeah, no. I'm saying that the process is what designed what we perceive as the universe, right? So
no, I'm pointing to
it's just one of those mysteries of the creator.
Anson, you're obfuscating here. The process you're referring to called evolution, you're saying produced logic and other metaphysics.
Yeah.
how does immaterial thing, or how does a material process produce immaterial categories?
That's an excellent question. Like I said, I don't really understand the mysteries of the creator that is evolution.
The creator assumes a being with intent. How does a process have intent?
Again, the way that evolution has designed our environment and the way that we interact with the universe, it's just a mystery. It's so vast.
Oh, okay. So you're going to just appeal to ignorance. So if
Well, that's the
you're
same thing. Same thing you have to appeal to.
No, I don't have to appeal to mystery.
Oh, you
we have
absolutely
revelation.
do.
No, we have
because you make
revelation.
assertions of design.
We have revelation. By the way,
them.
Anson, you're making a category error. Evolution is a material process. There's no place that you can argue evolution from the biological or non-biological, whatever that means. By the way, the non-biological evolution term you're using assumes that there is some lawful behavior between particular unrelated objects in space.
Yeah, all objects have history.
Okay, the reason it's a category error is you're arguing within physical processes, okay? And that's not the same argument from God. So the argument from God that God is necessary for intent, your own argument requires the justification of intent. That means designer. That means towards something. That means teleology is in play. So you're assuming a telos, a purpose, an order, a direction towards something. And yet you have no personal mind behind it. You just have unrelated objects. So if you say unrelated objects called the universe got together and produced mind-dependent categories such that it necessitated a process that produced your human mind, right? You have an accidentalist approach. Now, do you think everything's accidental?
Oh no, absolutely not. I don't think it's accidental. Because the constraints of our evolutionary scaffolding are very, very precise, and our evolutionary history
what's evolutionary scaffolding? This is nonsense words.
No, it's not nonsense.
What is one item in the scaffolding of evolution?
Well, a human is an object within the scaffolding. An elephant is an object.
No.
Depending on if you go out large enough to the macro level, I mean, Earth is an object.
A human. Is it not the case from your view that a human would need to be a thing that was produced after you had the scaffolding in place?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, then that's a contradiction. So if a human is a byproduct of the scaffolding, I ask you to name an item in the scaffolding, a vertical or horizontal piece of the scaffolding. What's one item you include as the scaffolding, which are, in your argument, you're doing a tag argument. You're doing a tag argument.
Oh, I am doing a tag argument. You're absolutely correct.
Yeah, it's a parody, but it falls apart because if I ask you name one piece that's the scaffolding, and you say a human, you've already made a mistake in your own system.
No.
Yeah, I just produced a mistake, dude. A human is a product of the process. Mm-hmm. If the scaffolding is the precondition for the process, then a human is not the scaffolding. A human is a byproduct of the process.
Right.
So it goes like this, Anson. Scaffolding first. You're replacing God with scaffolding. Process next, and then creatures like humans are the last step, right?
Well, there's all kinds of different objects. We're not necessarily the last step, but
I asked you a question, dude. Is it the case that you start with scaffolding as the precondition for all things? Then there's a process that's permitted from the scaffolding. Well, then you get creatures, right?
You start with a universe.
Is that the scaffolding?
No, you start with a universe.
Okay, universe assumes scaffolding, right?
No, universe assumes all things, all objects.
Are the laws of identity? Does the universe as it is? Does it have a set of operations?
It has features. Absolutely.
Is it regular? Does it operate a certain lawful way?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, how does the universe produce lawful operations?
Well, see, now you're inserting a design argument in there.
No, I didn't insert. I asked you a question. Dude, don't be a little weasel. I asked you gave yourself a universe, right? I asked you, does the universe operate with regularity? Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
This is called a cross-examination. I'm not inserting any designer. Okay. does the universe produce its own regularity from your view?
No, because it doesn't have a designer.
Okay, so the universe, before as it exists, there's something called the universe, right?
Yeah, we can agree that a universe exists, right? We don't have to argue that point.
Listen, in your view, the universe exists is the first step, right?
What? No, it's not the first step. It's universal. It's infinite.
What's the
universe,
first, dude?
The
This
universe is infinite, like your
unbearable,
God.
dude. Listen, we're going off your view. Stop talking about God. This is your internal critique of your view. Okay.
Yeah.
You said, I'm asking for the ultimate necessary precondition before all things that you call scaffolding. You said the universe exists. To say the universe exists as an ontological statement, you're saying that the things that you call particulars in the universe are made up of a whole called the universe. So what you're really saying is particulars exist, right?
Yeah, and
Okay.
they have features.
Great. Do particulars operate a certain way at this point?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so there is the regularity of nature.
Yeah.
Okay, so did the universe, as the precondition for all things, produce the regularity?
No, because it doesn't have a designer.
So how do you get the regularity from the universe then?
Oh well, how do you get regular? So how do chemical bonds have a history and a memory?
No,
and know
before
to bond
chemical
together?
bonds.
The laws,
No.
the laws of the universe.
You're asking.
The laws.
You're asking why the physical environment has constraints and behaves a certain way.
How does it
Why are there
produce
rules?
regular behavior?
What's that?
It's
I didn't
not
hear
just constraints. Constraints themselves are a feature of regularity that tells you what it can't do. The law of identity is one of those things,
Right.
and the laws of physics. These are all regular laws, right? I'm asking you,
How did the game of life get rules?
How did your universe,
they're physical laws.
How did your universe in its
The
initial
law of
form,
identity is a physical law, and
the law of
physical
identity is
object.
not a physical law. The law of identity, the law of identity still applies to logical statements, which are non-physical.
Right, and it's a part of our evolutionary scaffolding that's been derived from our non-biological evolution.
Your evolutionary scaffolding is under attack right now, and you're unable to defend it right now because the scaffolding, as you put it, requires regularity and invariant laws. But from your view, if the universe is the ultimate beginning creator of all things, you're going to have to tell me how the universe itself, a collection of unrelated particulars, produces immaterial invariant laws of behavior, and you can't do that.
Well, the nature of the creator is difficult to understand as a
human. That's called not being able to answer the question. That's really all I need, Your Honor.
It was a pleasure, Jim Bob. Thank you. Well, that was an honor.
I'm gonna let you. Is there anything you guys want to? Is there anything you guys want to discuss about that before I bring on our next caller?
No, I would just say that is basically what Jim Bob just did it in a more eloquent way. It's the fact of it's saying, Anson, like you would have a better shot at claiming to the laws as being your starting point. That's what I was saying. You kept starting in the middle. This is not a good argument, but at least claiming the laws and the regularity of nature is the starting point. At least then you're giving yourself an immaterial concept to work off of. But if you're giving yourself a physical concept, that's what Jim Bob was saying, you cannot grant the rest from that.
Right. And what I'm saying is that the scaffolding determines from like the earliest copies of objects in the universe, the scaffolding determines what those immaterial objects will be once we get more complex objects, right? The universe didn't have to evolve the way that it did. It could have evolved with a entirely different set of scaffolding, and we could have different laws of logic.
Yeah, but you need to explain the scaffolding. Like that's the problem you're finding in your reasoning with this is you're just saying scaffolding, but you're not defining scaffolding. Right. That is because you're granting a cause without stating what it is.
Right, and I'll have to work on that, and I appreciate that that feedback, Chris.
Yeah, man. So I'm pretty sure there's another caller there.
Oh, okay, I'm on. I was just laughing at Anson's argument about his satirical type of tag, and he's I just want to ask you one question, Anson. I know you, like, we're friends and all, but like you're completely nonsensical in everywhere and every way in this topic. How using tag, um, does it imply that the evolutionary standpoint uses presupposes logic? So how is evolution something that presupposes logic? Because if you're using tag, then logic is a reason for the presupposition. So it makes sense to be a personal being of God, but in what way is and where is it written or said or proven scientifically that evolution will definitely lead to logic? There is nothing that points to that at all.
Right. So tag, from my perspective, tag simply says that there must be a creator. Right, and it defines the creator as the thing, and it defines within the transcendental argument for God that the thing that is the creator is the one who created the conditions for logic and morality to come into existence. And what my argument is that the universe with the non-biological evolution created those objects that are not physical, and we just understand them because our evolutionary scaffolding has created complexity within us and evolutionary history within us to allow us to be able to perceive them. Right, we can perceive mathematics because of our evolutionary scaffolding in history.
But what you just described actually is paradoxical to the evolutionary standpoint. It actually proves God's existence even more, because you're saying that.
Oh,
Sorry,
we lost God.
someone was calling me. Sorry. So I was saying that what you just said proves that tag actually relates to a personal being a creator that is the only source of logic and the only source of possibility for logic for humans, and it still doesn't work in the evolutionary standpoint. If you just keep on repeating that it's the scaffolding, the scaffolding that doesn't
Yeah,
even have
and
it's you're basically saying God. And so the evolutionary scaffolding is God. Okay, so
exactly, that's my point. Thank
okay,
you for
then it's
repeating my
it's
point.
a personal God, and then it's exactly the so in our perspective, what you're saying that the evolutionary scaffolding is a personal being, which is the Christian God, and it doesn't need evolution. There's no requirement for evolution. It doesn't presuppose us being a lower species and turning into what we are today.
You
There's
see,
nothing.
then it ultimately, like he says, it creates
There's no
the
presupposition.
thing that it ultimately comes down to God and again a creator creating it, so that it ends up being, you see what I'm saying, that's why the affirming position on this is incorrect, stating that we are where we are because of evolution. That's why I wanted to take this argument with you, because ultimately you will always get back to God.
Yeah, even though even if we grant you that evolution happened, it still comes back to God. But scientifically, there's nothing that proves, and there's no hypothesis that even relates even closely to evolution being true, and that's why we conform to our Christian belief, and that's the only logical belief. Because if you by using tag proves God, then it
Yeah.
proves that what the Christian God says is true. It's
Well,
regarding to the creation of man.
I
So
was just granting. I was just granting that there is a designer, and the designer is the process of evolution. And
but
and
but it
and
doesn't
and,
make
and in order
sense.
for the process to exist, the physical reality of the universe had to exist.
Yes,
But then
but
you
a
just keep
process is
then
not
you
the
just keep on
explanation of
going
the
back and
source.
going back and going back till eternity. Then this
Yeah,
needs
and
no,
and
yeah, then this requires an eternal being, because
right, and the infinite
there's something that comes
regress.
before. There's something that comes before everything. If you're following the laws of physics, there nothing
Right,
comes without anything. So you require an eternal being. For even if we grant you all of what you're saying, even if we grant every single point you're saying, if you go back to every single point that, okay, we need evolution, and evolution doesn't happen if there isn't a universe, and then the universe doesn't happen if there isn't, etc., and etc., and etc., then it comes to eternity or infinity, and then it requires an eternal being, because if you keep on going, it'll just become an eternal being. So you just keep on proving that your kind of satirical definition of tag and the evolutionary standpoint doesn't make like a single ounce of sense. I'm sorry. You're like, I love you, Anson, but like
See, at the end of
it's
the day,
extremely
at the
dumb.
end of
Like,
the day, a process needs to facilitate a designer or a cause, which i.e. relates to God. Process is not the source, but the creator of the process. What put the process in motion would be the ultimate source, not
right,
explaining the process.
right, and it's hard. It's hard to articulate. Um, and I'm not the best and most articulate person, but I'll try and do it. So when you have a universe, it has objects in it already, and when those objects interact with one another, they do so in a way that is uniform and abides by a set of laws and rules, right? And the tag argument says, well, if there's laws and rules that are not physical, then they must have had a creator, because you can't have laws and rules for how the environment interacts without a creator existing. And what I'm saying is that those laws and rules are just a part of the universe, and and they're a feature of the environment. I'm not saying yeah, like when I was starting with the chemical bonds example, and how the earliest, most primordial level one scaffolding began. You know,
Yeah, but that can't
when
be
molecules
scientifically
interact with one
proven.
another, there's a memory in the chemical bonds where they arrange themselves automatically within the bonds,
A
right?
process or rules, yes, again, but
Right.
again, you're still gonna find
And
yourself in the issue of to have a game, you would need rules, and for the rules of the game, you would need the game designer.
right, and that's where you get into the part where you're asserting a designer, and
Well, it
and then
necessitates a
I
designer.
argue,
It necessitates a
and
mind.
then and then
That's what
I
you have to
argue the
grasp with.
watchmaker fallacy again, where I say, well,
It
if there's a designer, then who designed the designer? And
no, but
then there's no way to get past that point, because we're basically both using the same argument structure.
no, it's not. It's not the same. That's what you have to realize. It's not the same thing. You asserting that it needs it that basically the designer needs a designer is just a fallacy. That's again, you're appealing to the infinite regress. So we it's just that just makes it circular and
No,
nonsensical.
the
That's what
the
you have
the
to realize.
no, what I'm trying to do is showcase that tag is fallacious, by using it to prove evolution, because it requires deductive reasoning that is axiomatic and creates that infinite regress, and therefore you can argue anything to be a creator, just so long as you assert that it meets the preconditions that are required to be a creator, even evolution.
Okay, but well, then let me ask you this. Then explain to me the progression of infinite regress. Then, if you're gonna advocate for infinite regress, what is the process then of infinite regress?
Well, I mean, it would be okay. So the evolution exists, and it exists within the universe. Well, what evolved the universe, right? And then that's the infinite regress. And the same thing happens when I bring up the watchmaker fallacy in design. It's a flaw in the deductive reasoning.
Yeah, but even with the watchmaker one, again, like that can also just be defeated. That's not really that good of an argument, because again, we're talking about metaphysics and you're appealing to a physical thing. So who created the designer? His father. Who created his father? His grandfather. So we can go all the way back, and then we still end up at God, Anson. So where you want to start on this story, friend? There's still a beginning to the book,
right? And that's what I'm saying, that time is infinite, so there's actually not a beginning.
Well, now you're just granting yourself time as well.
Yeah.
Time is not real.
Time is not real. Yeah, we'll argue about time next time. I'm not even moderately well prepared to argue about time.
Anson, you just said evolution exists within the universe. So you also said evolution is immaterial. How is it that an immaterial thing can exist within a physical universe?
Same way God does.
So does it evolution is a being?
Well, no, it's immaterial and universal, just like God. It's the creator.
Well, no, God exists outside of the universe. So you just
the universe is everything. God has to exist within it.
Within
it had to have come from somewhere, so it cannot.
Though, dude,
it cannot physically be everything. That is an impossibility.
Okay. So there's a second environment within which God exists. So who created that environment?
Hold on. Let's not go there. I mean, we're talking just evolution first. And also God is uncreated, so that's a category error. But anyways, so evolution is not a being.
No, you're right about that.
Okay, so then it doesn't have existence.
No, but it is an object. It's not a being. It doesn't have consciousness.
Oh, it's an object. Okay, so can you physically point to evolution?
No, not any more than I can point to logic.
Okay. Does evolution have mind?
No, absolutely not.
Okay. Is there anything in the universe that you can point to that has mind?
Has a mind? Yeah, I mean, humans have a mind, and lots of highly evolved objects have minds.
So, okay, so you said evolution is immaterial, and can you point to immaterial concepts that exist without mind?
Immaterial objects. Oh, I can't point to any immaterial objects that are observable without a mind.
So evolution did not exist until the human mind came.
No, humans couldn't observe it until we evolved our mind.
So evolution did exist without a mind.
Evolution.
You're in a contradiction.
Well, maybe I misunderstood. Go back and run that one more time. Perhaps I.
That's your contradiction. You made a contradiction. So you're saying immaterial things do not exist without a mind, and that there was no mind until humans, but evolution had to exist before there was a mind.
Immaterial things are not observable without a mind.
No, I'm not talking about observation.
Therefore, immaterial objects couldn't be understood until they were evolved.
No, I'm not talking about observation. I didn't use that word. I said existence.
I did when I answered you, though, the first time.
But my question was on existence, and you already stated that it does not exist. I'm going to nose up like everyone else. Do you see what I'm saying here? I'm talking about existence, ontological existence. Okay.
Existence. Okay.
And you're saying that you agree with me, right? That immaterial concepts do not exist without mind.
No, they're not observable without a mind. That's what I keep saying.
Okay, so it does exist without a mind.
Yeah. Yeah, but you can't observe it until you're as an object have evolved the ability to grasp the laws of logic and reasoning.
Okay, so evolution is an immaterial concept that exists within material.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay,
evolution is immaterial and universal. Absolutely.
and it's only observable with mind, but it still exists.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so how do you bridge the gap between immaterial and material without a mind?
Right, and that's just one of the mysteries of the creation that evolution has made that I don't fully understand. I'm comfortable not understanding that.
That's begging the question because you're still appealing to the fact that it does exist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you're just admitting.
Yeah,
You're admitting that you're
Chris, like I've told Chris, I'm using the theistic argument for evolution, and that's the same
No, you're
argument
not.
that theists use.
No, you're not. You've strayed so much. You've talked about causality, which I mean, if you're talking, if we want to get into the infinite time, you have an issue with causality there, but I really don't want to. I still want to stick with this evolution and mind and being and material and immaterial thing for a minute. So if we're talking about existence, we have to talk about where does something exist? And if you're saying that the universe is what exists, then you have and you're positing that there's an immaterial aspect to the universe.
Right.
The only way that you can point to something immaterial is if there is a mind.
Well, no, not necessarily. And I'll go back to the bonding of molecular objects and the fact that the chemical bonds have a history, and they're non-biological processes where two objects that have been bonded together, if you tear them apart, will spontaneously bond back together in the same order that they had been bonded in before. It required no mind to do, yet it
You're
is a
talking about
feature of the non-biological universe.
you're talking about memory, right? And organization.
Yeah.
How do those
Objects have a memory.
how do those exist without a mind?
Well, they're a part of the physical features of the universe.
No, you're saying a part of, you're still pointing to something physical.
Yeah, the universe.
But you're
Everything's
claiming something immaterial. You have a contradiction here between immaterial and material.
No.
You're pointing, you're begging the question here. You're pointing at physical things, and then you're saying, grant me this immaterial.
Right, and what you're asserting is that there's no explanation for it because it didn't have some sort of
It's not
mind that
about
made
me.
it.
It's an internal critique on what you're
Right.
saying.
Right, and what I'm
Why
saying.
is it that you have to point to the? Why is it you have to point to me to justify your own claim?
Well,
That doesn't make sense.
I'm using your words to try and understand the argument that you're making so that I can understand how to respond.
Yeah, but you're no. You're deflecting from what I'm saying. I'm giving an internal critique that's showing a contradiction and a category error of how you're begging the question and jumping from material to immaterial without justifying that. Your justification itself is pointing at, you're saying a part of the universe. You're pointing at physical things,
Right.
and then saying, look, here's this immaterial thing called memory and organization.
Right.
That's a mind dependent category that's immaterial.
Yeah,
See, here's the difference. You're arguing there is no immaterial universal mind. We in TAG are.
I'm arguing that it's only observable when there's a sufficient level of evolutionary scaffolding. I'm not arguing that there is no. I'm arguing that it is.
Is there any
inherent? It's an inherent part of the universe.
Is there
it's
any
not something
human
that required a creator? It simply exists as a.
Is there any human mind that is universal, or is it a particular mind?
But no, the complexity of the human mind evolved from the lower level evolution, right? So it's not universal. I don't know how to answer that question in the context of this conversation.
Is your mind particular, or is it universal?
Is my mind only my mind? Is that what you're
Your
asking?
mind, you,
Yeah.
yes, Anson's mind.
Yeah,
It's a particular mind.
it's only my mind. Yeah, I'm a specific object.
So, how do you bridge the gap from a particular physical human to an immaterial universal mind? Because you are appealing
I've never
to.
asserted
Hold
that
on,
there
hold
was
on, hold on. You are appealing to an immaterial universal concept. See, we have two opposing categories here. We have material and immaterial, and then we have another set of physical, or sorry, universal and particular, right? So if you have a universal concept that implies a universal mind to match the category, right? If
No,
we have a
no.
particular, one sec, I'm almost done. If you have a particular mind, all you can really get would be particular concepts, correct?
Right, and I've never made the assertion that there was some universal mind.
I understand.
Just because immaterial objects exist in the universe and they exist not dependent upon my particular mind, it doesn't require them to have had a mind. Like that's just bizarre.
It does, because concepts don't exist outside of the mind.
Concepts don't exist. No, but the laws of logic do.
Can you pour me a glass of the law of identity?
No,
Not
because
with ice. With ice,
it's
bro.
it's
I
it's
mean,
immaterial.
bartender, it's
Just
Saturday. It's been a rough week. Please, I need the strongest bottle of causality that you have for me, bartender. I'm so thirsty.
no, you can't do that with immaterial objects. Of course not.
Correct. So they require mind.
I mean, you keep making that assertion like it's some sort of refutation of something that I've said without explaining why.
Because of the absurdity of the contrary, it's part of the category itself. When you point to something physical, you're pointing to something particular, right? So you have it's like this. Universals are not particulars, correct? Let's take it
Well,
one step at a time.
yeah, universals are composed of all objects. They're
No,
universal.
no, 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 no. Not if you have all particulars. There's two different words there. You have
Yeah.
all, and particular. So the
Right.
all would be the universal aspect.
Yeah.
The particular, when you're saying particular,
Yeah,
you're
you're talking about an
pointing to
object, a
something
specific
individual,
object.
right? But when you say all, you're appealing to something that is beyond the scope. You actually can't grasp all physical things because you're a particular mind, and that's a whole other philosophical
Oh
thing
yeah,
that
you're right
Father
about that,
Deacon
man.
Ananias. Right. So at least you agree. Okay, cool. We don't have to get into it. Father Deacon Ananias talks about that, about how empirically all is a nonsensical thing on empiricism. Yeah. So, but anyways, universals are not particulars. Okay. And then we say physical things are particulars.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
physical things have a finite nature. I'll agree with that.
Okay, so then we take that and we invert it. So that means universal things are not physical things.
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean the like we've already talked about, which I'm not prepared to discuss, but time being one of those for sure.
Okay, we don't, yeah. I mean, we'll just ignore time, but I mean, we can talk about, since we were already saying logic, right?
Yeah.
So that could be our example. And okay, so then we say we have universals and particulars. Since universals are not physical things, then that means, shoot, I don't think I can minimize StreamYard. I have this on a list. This is Father Deacon Ananias's argument against against physicalism using the immateriality of the mind argument. I wish I had this memorized. So then, universals are not physical things. Oh, then he introduces concepts. Concepts are not physical things.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. So concepts being not physical things, he says some concepts are universals. Can you agree with that? The reason we say some,
Well,
the reason we say
con-
some is just because if you can point to one concept, it would be a defeater. So I mean, it just kind of keeps
I
from
don't.
getting rabbit trailed.
Yeah, I
But
don't
just say
know. Yeah, I don't know
concepts
if.
are
Yeah,
universals.
I don't know if I could go that far because they originate from a particular mind.
Yeah, and that's part of the thing. That's why we say some, but you can say at least say some, right? I think I'm getting this a little off on the steps.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I could agree to that. I'd have to. And I'm going to be honest with you. I have to think about that. That's like free will.
So
It's one
so
of those
concepts,
concepts. Like okay,
right?
free will as a concept.
But are you pointing to something physical or no? Even if
No.
you were, yeah. So okay, so no. So I mean, that's where I'm getting at is, right? Concepts are immaterial.
Yeah.
Yeah, and immaterial things are, generally speaking, universals. It's what we've already established, right? Universals are, or at least, yeah, we did. We established that in the first part of the premise, right? Physicals are particulars. Universals are not physical, therefore, universals are not particulars, or immaterials are not particulars. Do you see where we're going with this?
Yeah, I
You
think
still
I think
follow?
I understand your train of thought. Yeah.
Okay. So then concepts do not exist in physical things. Therefore, when we talk of concepts, we also say that concepts are not physical, so therefore they exist in mind. Because we can't pour a glass of the law of identity.
No, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay. So then that mind is not a physical thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. My
Now,
mind is not a physical thing. I still haven't gone off and granted that concepts can be universal. You made that assertion, and I haven't been able to
can
make
be.
the point yet.
Oh, okay. So when we talk about universal, we talk about applying in all places at all times.
Right.
Let's just use that as a simple definition, right?
Yeah.
Immaterial, invariant.
Right. Well, from my perspective, there's only one thing that fits that category.
What would that be?
Well, the universe. Nothing else fits that category.
No, the universe is not immaterial, and it's actually variant. Is the universe changing?
So you're saying that universals can be material?
No, I didn't grant that. No, that would have to be demonstrated. But notice I did say before that some concepts could be. I mean, there could be a, or no, was I saying that there's a sum in there to avoid this kind of rabbit trail?
Yeah.
It's kind of a rabbit trail from the point that we're getting at. So that's why it can just be like, sure, I'll grant it, and let's just move on back to what I'm talking about. Because if I can demonstrate that there is a universal concept like the law of logic, then it allows us to move forward.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Then I'm down with that. Yeah. The laws of logic would be universal, but I'm not really ready to grant. I guess. Well, maybe they're not universal. I don't know. I would almost no. I'll say they're universal. We'll say they're universal. I'm comfortable with that.
And what we're talking about when we say universal, again, what we established in the first part of this argument was that universals are not particulars.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Two objects can't exist in the same place at the same time.
right, but
Yeah.
a universal essentially does, right?
Yeah, but that's
it
because
exists.
it's immaterial.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It is immaterial. Correct. So when we're talking about concepts, like this, if we're talking about immaterial concepts that are universal, we would have a category error if we are just saying that these concepts are invented by our particular human mind.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Because
I agree with that. Yeah.
okay, so then that means that there must be an immaterial, invariant, universal mind.
See, now there you go, making that leap again.
It's not a leap, it's the logical entailment of
well-
everything that we've demonstrated up to this point. All the categories that we've established, it's a necessary
See, and now
condition.
you're getting into why I have so much pain, because I can't get past that point, because that's something that I've wrestled with for like 25 years trying to get past.
You know how you
basically-
lose in musical chairs? If you run around and you're not able to get on the chair, you just keep going around in circles, man.
Yeah, no, it's painful not believing in God and having the nihilism within inside you. It's awful. I wish I could do it. But the transition that you're making, of saying that there must be a universal mind, I still haven't gotten past the point where it just because you can observe it with your particular mind as a concept that is universal, it's not necessarily something that isn't a natural part of the universe within the constraints that the universe exists. Just because it exists and it's immaterial, from my perspective, doesn't necessarily require a mind to have created it.
That doesn't see now you've using that word part implies particular.
Right. Well, it's a
And that's
particular
and now
it's a
you've
particular feature of the universe. It can be a universal in the universe, meaning it's a feature of the entire universe, but it is just a part of its entirety.
no, but you're not understanding here. Even if I grant that it is a part of all particulars, there still is something that goes beyond all the physical particulars. We've already established that, right? If you're looking at, say, a pile of toothpicks or a QR code, right? We understand, because we have a mind, that the QR code has information behind it. But how is it that we don't know that maybe that pile of toothpicks on the ground doesn't have information behind it when it can be decoded? That sort of mind and information aspect requires an encoder and a decoder. There's mind and agency and intention, telos, as Jim Bob said, behind all of that. So, but without mind, when you look at all of the little objects in the universe, say like I'll just grant for a second the moment after the Big Bang, when everything was just hydrogen, and then you're arguing that it moves from that simplicity towards complexity, making that categorical distinction between simple and complex also requires mind. There's otherwise it just is. There is no such thing as a category of simple or complex without mind. Like it just is. There's just particulars just there. Just like a pile of toothpicks is just there.
Okay. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the things that are there aren't bound by physical constraints that impact those material items, and the the material items that exist also exist in that same environment with the immaterial items that create those constraints, like the laws of logic.
Yeah, but those things also are immaterial. The constraints. So, like we talk about information as constraints. If you don't have any constraints, you really don't have information. So that's one information theory, at least. But when we're talking about laws and physical things being constrained by all these laws, you're still appealing to something that is outside of the universe. You're pointing to these immaterial concepts to guide the material.
Right. And
You're
and, and,
so
and
so
that's and that's
appealing to
exactly
the
what and
evading the question.
that's exactly what it is in my worldview.
Yeah, but
Yeah, that's exactly that is a really good explanation of what it's like.
but but you have a category error and you have contradiction and you're begging the question and you're assuming the consequence. Like there's so many logical fallacies here. And I mean, the only thing you can't even say anything. I mean, but even if you could say something, all you could say is it just is. There's no
Yeah.
category at all.
Yeah, well,
Like,
the nature of the universe simply is. That's correct.
but now you're saying is, and you're presupposing any kind of ontological being, and you even said earlier, evolution doesn't have any ontological being. It's not is. It's not is. You see the your contradiction after contradiction here in your own statements. I'm sorry, but it's completely incoherent.
Well, I appreciate that feedback, and I'll work on it.
There is no working on it. I'm sorry. You're bridging two completely opposing things. You have
Oh, I'm aware. I'm aware of what I'm doing.
physical immaterial and universal in particular. Just think of those four things and try and grapple with those. Are you on Discord?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Have you checked out Father Deacon Ananias's Immateriality of the Mind?
No, I don't follow that particular one.
Okay.
Yeah, I follow a
I
lot of
think it
the.
would be something good
I
to
follow
look
a lot
at.
of the Orthodox
Yeah.
stuff. I'm a big fan of the Orthodox stuff.
Which server can I? Are you in Jim Bob's server? Where can I?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
he's in Jim Bob server.
Okay. What's your username, dude?
Oh hell, I don't know. Hold on, let me
It's the same as your name, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Anson,
It's
it's the
my
same
name.
as your name.
I can
Yes.
connect
Yeah,
to
it's his
Justin.
name.
I have him on there.
Okay, cool. Mr. Westford will hook us up. Anson, I will send you a couple of videos from Father Deacon on this argument that I'm running.
Yeah.
He explains it better than I can because he made it. So
Yeah, I'd be happy to read it and think about it for sure.
yeah. So well, cool, man. I'm gonna pop off. Thanks for the chat. Thanks for the grapple. This was a fun morning for me.
Thank you, Dustin. Yeah, I do think I've also wanted to look at Father Deacon Ananias' stuff, Anson, and I think that would be a good recommendation to, if you're struggling with this concept, and as you said, it entails some pains.
No, it's
I
been
would say
painful.
delve into it and mull it over a bit more, and look into whatever arguments or knowledge is out there to basically consume.
Well, that's why I wanted to have this debate, because I had to figure out what was wrong with my thinking, and so I wanted to go into it with everything that I could possibly muster in terms of my intellect that I've used to explain what the universe is. Because as an atheist, you know, it's not one of those things. Like for Christians, it's simple. You have a history and you have a book and you have an understanding. But for atheists to not fall into the trap of nihilism and despair, you have to find meaning in the universe independently, and like Nietzsche said, kind of become your own god. And
Well, but
that's
it just
destructive.
requires a reframing. And from some of your arguments you've made, I feel like you probably fall more into the agnostic valley than the atheist valley. I think you're already halfway there, man.
I don't think that agnostics exist. I think that they're atheists who are too scared to take a position. It's a fence sitting tactic that atheists use to not have to argue a position. I'd rather argue a position and be wrong and have to think about it more than to say, well, I can't prove there isn't a God. Oh, like.
Yeah, but I don't agree with that statement though, because one is a rejection of God in totality, and the other one is basically granting or accepting a God, but not adding a denomination to
Right.
it or a specific description. So
Well,
I would say that there is a difference.
if you're going to go to the trouble of granting there's a God, you sure as hell better pick one.
I mean, I mean, this isn't my belief, but I would say it doesn't necessarily. It wouldn't entail that. I mean,
Yeah.
you wouldn't necessarily have to have a concept of God and have that be something you believe in, and then having to attach that to a said religion or said
Right.
God. I mean, it's not an entailment of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, it's Jim Bob. He's back.
Hey, Dustin, I want to continue where Dustin left off. He had you in a good spot. He had you affirm that laws of logic are conceptual and absolute. And so the next premise would be, are concepts mind dependent? So I'd ask you that. If the laws of thought, law of identity is conceptual and absolute or universal, then are concepts mind dependent? Anson?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the observation of concepts is mind dependent,
You
not
can't
necessarily the
observe
concept itself.
but you can't observe a concept without using concepts. So I don't know what you mean by observe a concept. What do you mean
Well,
by that?
some concepts exist absent of the mind, and therefore you can't say that the concepts exist because of the mind.
Which concept exists absent of mind? Could you list one?
Yeah,
What?
immaterial concepts like uh, logic and time.
How did you
Concepts.
how did you determine what logic and time were without a mind?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. You can't observe it without the mind. That's exactly true.
You said they exist without the mind. How did you determine that logic exists without the mind?
How did I because I could die and logic would still exist. It's not dependent upon my mind to exist.
I didn't ask if you
Just gonna
think
prepare
logic
myself for
exists.
Jim Bob round 2.
I didn't ask if you think logic exists if you die. I asked, how did you determine logic exists without a mind?
You can't.
So then your claim that logic exists without a mind is false, or at least unsubstantiated. So back to the premise one: is logic conceptual and universal?
Yeah, I'd say that logic is conceptual and is present throughout the entirety of the universe.
Great. So if logic is conceptual and universal, and it precedes your mind, and it exists if you die, and it's mind dependent because concepts are mind dependent, then you've just necessitated a divine mind that precedes your own and all of ours.
Well,
by logic.
yeah,
by logic.
Only I only granted that the observation of the immaterial object is observable with
You
the
can't
mind.
observe. You can't observe an immaterial object.
Well, you can observe it with logic.
No, how do you observe something? What's the definition of observe? Are you talking about acknowledge or?
Well, acknowledge the existence of the concept is what I'm saying.
Okay, so you've just argued that you actually do need the mind, and now you're back in the solipsism that Dustin walked you through, which is minds are particular. And so for you as a particular mind to observe or acknowledge a universal concept, you've actually just argued that it's not actually universal. It's grounded in just your mind. So you're back into solipsism.
Yeah, the observation is grounded in just my mind, but not the concept. Some concepts are universal and some are not.
Where's the concept of the law of identity, right? If your mind isn't the grounding of that thing.
Yeah, so the law of identity is rooted in our physical evolution.
Evolution. Dude, hold on. Evolution is another metaphysical concept you're just deploying. I'm asking the methodology. I'm not asking where you think these things spawn from. I'm saying if a universal concept exists, as Dustin walked you through, like the law of identity, and by your own reasoning, it precedes your own mind, that the law of identity holds true in the universe before you're able to describe it. Now, we're not talking about your ability to describe it. We're actually talking about the ontological existence of something immaterial and conceptual that you're discerning. You're not creating it, right? You're discerning it.
Right, yeah.
So if you're so if it's a concept that you're discerning, and concepts are mind dependent, and the concept of laws of logic precede your mind, then you're saying that concepts themselves are discerned and precede your own mind.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay,
My own
so
mind.
okay, great. So then, if you agree that a concept precedes our minds, and how do you define a concept without a mind? Then you're basically you're stuck in a corner here, because for you to say there's no preceding absolute divine mind, you're actually saying that concepts can exist without a mind. Now you're trapped in a corner.
Yeah, DVD is useless without the player, man.
No,
yeah,
I understand the logic.
This is a true dilemma right here. If concepts are mind dependent and there are universal concepts that precede minds, then you've just necessitated the mind that precedes all of our minds that can ground universals.
Yeah, but the observation of the concept precedes the mind. Right? The observation of the concept. No, the observation of the concept requires the mind, but some concepts are exist independent of the mind, and
I asked you again. I got you. You just back into square one. You can't actually tell me a concept that exists without the mind, but you're affirming it again now. You're saying, well, we need our mind to observe or acknowledge the concept, but that but the concept exists without the mind. Well, you're making the assertion again. I asked you, how do you come to know that a concept could exist without the mind, and you said you can't. So why are you making affirmatives of statements you can't justify? Why do you keep affirming things you can't? When we asked you, how do you know such a thing? This is an epistemic claim you're making about metaphysics, and you're going, I can't know that. So why would we argue with someone who says concepts could exist without a mind, and we ask you for an example, and you say it's impossible to give one?
Yeah, well, I'm comfortable with not knowing certain facets of how the universe exists.
It's not about not knowing. If you don't know, then you say you can't know if a concept can exist without a mind. But you're actually making the affirmative. So it's not like you're saying I don't know if a concept could exist without a mind.
Because
you're saying
it logically makes sense.
No, you're saying a concept can exist without a mind. That's different. Yeah. So if you're saying
it can't be formulated. It can't be formulated into something discernible without a mind.
Okay, so then you can't know the statement's true, okay? So I recommend, if you're going to get into debates about stuff and you take an affirmative position like concepts can exist without a mind, you're going to have to give an example when your opponent asks you, oh, that's an interesting take. Can you substantiate that claim and give an example of a concept that can exist without a mind? But you're stuck in a trap because you'll be using your mind ultimately to state whatever the universal concept you're pointing to is.
Yeah.
So you can't. You just got to stop saying, if you get into these debates again and you say concepts can exist without a mind, then your opponent, if they're sharp, is just going to go, which concept is that?
Well, yeah.
And then you're stuck, and you just. Yeah, but you can't.
I'm not stuck because there are lots of concepts that can exist without the mind.
Give me one.
Well, every single mathematics is a concept that exists without the mind.
How did you determine math exists without a mind?
Oh, you can't determine it exists without a mind, but that doesn't mean
then
that
stop
it requires a
claiming
mind
it.
to exist.
Dude,
you're making the assertion that it requires a mind to exist just because you can't observe it without a mind.
No, you're making the assertion math exists without a mind, and I asked you what method did you use epistemically to determine that conclusion, and you said you can't, you don't have one. So all you're saying is nonsensical, unverifiable statements about epistemology and mind, and that's it. That's all you're doing. You're a sophist, dude. You're a total sophist.
I don't agree with that. But let me say that I can observe that they exist because I have a mind, but that doesn't necessarily
that's called mind dependent.
Right, and that doesn't mean that it wouldn't exist if my mind didn't exist.
Then you're agnostic. Then you can't make the claim that you can point to a universal concept that exists without a mind, because for you to even posit the concept is using your own mind, and you're actually saying that something mind dependent that's discernible from a mind exists in some ontological way before you discover it. So you're stuck in this is what's interesting, is that you're actually stuck in a position that necessitates a divine mind, but you keep rejecting the necessity of it while you affirm positions that actually necessitate the mind. And then you keep going back to your own mind and going, well, I discern the universal concepts, but
Yeah,
we're
because I
asking
have a mind.
if they're universal concepts that are discernible and they're concept and they're mind dependent, that means the concepts themselves precede your ability to discern them.
Yeah,
So
that's
that means
true.
the concepts themselves precede your mind. And so if concepts are mind dependent and they precede your mind, you've just necessitated another mind that precedes yours. Otherwise, you don't know what you're saying when you say concept. Otherwise, all you're pointing to is a material universe that is not bound together by any uniform concepts, law of identity, regularity. There's nothing meaningful behind the pure matter of it. It's just physicalism, parts. But now you're in a contradiction because just like Dustin walked you through, the moment you point to a universal, you're pointing to something immaterial, mind dependent, and doesn't exist as matter. Okay? So that requires a mind. So if you're discerning, again, one more time, if concepts are universal and mind dependent, and there's concepts that precede your own mind, then the conclusion is that the concepts that precede your mind require a mind. So whose mind is it?
The concepts that precede my mind required a different mind to observe, not a mind for them to exist.
What is the thing being observed? If not a concept.
Any immaterial object.
Are you saying that's a concept? So that's a concept.
And material objects require minds. So that's a
concept. Those are concepts.
Yeah, observation requires a mind.
Yeah. So if you're observing something that's conceptual, that means it existed before. So now you're turning the concept into the referent, the thing you're referring to. I'm asking you, what provides that concept? You're making a conflation, Anson, between objects, concepts existing ontologically, and your ability to discern them. I'm granting our ability to discern concepts, but because they precede your ability to discern them, that means they have their own ontological existence. But if they're mind dependent, you've necessitated the ontological existence of a mind before yours. Otherwise, what is it you're discerning as a concept? You're just the consequence of your position is that you're actually not discerning a concept. You're creating one with your brain. You're just creating one. It's a fiction. If you're actually discerning a concept that's universal and precedes your mind, and concepts are mind dependent, then you've necessitated a mind before yours. We're not talking about your ability to discern them. We're talking about justifying their very existence. Two different statements.
Right. And what you're saying is that in order to have universal concepts, that there was a mind.
Yeah, because concepts are mind dependent. You're saying it too.
Well, I'm saying observation of concepts is mind dependent, and not the concept as mind dependent.
Okay. So if you're going to argue concepts themselves are ontologically not mind dependent, and yet your only access to them is mind dependent mechanisms, you're going to have to then, like I said, you're back in the corner where you have to tell me an example of a concept that exists without a mind. But you can't. It's a performative contradiction. You're stuck in a solipsistic corner. But my phone's going to die. But anyway, Dustin, good work if you're still listening. That was a really good drawing him into the path of what the conclusion is.
Thanks,
Anson. Appreciate you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Yeah, so I mean, Jim Bob gave some really good further clarification, on the whole concept, and then also how you're approaching it.
Right. Well, and I never really got past the point where I kept spinning around because I think I don't know. I felt like we were just talking past each other at one point because he accused me of basically circular logic, and I still don't see the circularity in what I'm saying. But I'll go back and review it and see if I can find it.
You're gonna have to review it because it's pretty much what all of us have done.
Right. Right. Well, I do
Yeah.
have to review it because I still don't understand what the hang up is, but I'll look at it.
Yeah.
It's Ivan.
Hi, guys. So what are we doing? Are we doing evolution versus non-evolution versus creation?
Is evolution true?
Yeah, it's not true, man. It's definitely not true. Yeah, certainly. And the reason why it's not true is because from the metaphysical presuppositions that I start with, which is that God does not lie, creation says that death does not enter the world before the fall of man. So if the world is to be good as a good creation, then death cannot exist. From this starting presupposition, we can try to work backwards into why that's the, let's say, the basis of a sound argument, why we should start from the presupposition of divine revelation. But my argument is that basically evolution is not compatible with Christianity, with a metaphysics of a good God, because it implies that, let's say, truth is obtained progressively. It's not an eternal concept, but rather it's something that is ever changing. The very concept of evolution starts from a metaphysical presupposition, which is basically uh, truth can change. And this is, let's say, the basis for our
Well, truth can't change. That's ridiculous. Why would truth be able to change? Truth is true. It's
well
either something is or it isn't. It's a objective.
Well, the thing is, evolution presupposes an ever-changing set of situations which obtain a different result. So the very premise of evolution is that in order to be better fitted to the environment, something needs to be changing. And from a metaphysical presupposition that, let's say, that order is superior to change, if creation is good, then change comes as a result of the fall, not as not as an ingredient within creation. The idea that uh, man can come from an animal, the idea that a more complex being can come from a more simple being, requires a mind. And we can take it into a more granular level and say that, for example, there is no way in which uh, uh, intermediate state is better than a previous state. So how do you evolve a heart when the complexity of a heart implies a creature who has a heart which is already defective? So you don't go from having a single um a single blood vessel into having a heart, and having that change be evolutionarily advantageous for a being. So when we talk about mutation and we talk about complexity, the arguments that people who are for evolution make never make sense in terms of mathematics. The amount of randomness that is needed uh, would destroy the very being. So what you have to do to what the reason why evolution presupposes ever mutability is that it doesn't respect identity in itself. It doesn't respect identity as a concept. So you have X being. For X being to mutate, to become a different being, it has to stop being what it already is. This being
Yeah.
already functions. So the change from that being that already,
Contradicting the law of identity.
yeah, exactly. So the way that you get to this idea that you can evolve means that you're getting closer to another ideal, an ideal truth that is already prefigured in, let's say, in the evolutionary framework. So you're actually presupposing what you're trying to prove. You're saying environmental environmental pressures change, so we need to go somewhere else. And in fact, if you study the history of evolution as a concept, it was actually devised by Charles Darwin to undermine Christianity and to promote racialist theories. So why should I believe a man who set out to bungle the science in order to undermine Christianity, to have a racist theory that allowed the British Empire to project its power abroad? On the contrary, I would have to say, I would have to attack it on every front and say none of it, none of it obtains, none of it obtains. It doesn't make any sense, and it's circular in its logic. So it's on, let's say it's on the, I would say that it's on the side of evolution to prove evolution. Yet the problem is they cannot create proof for it. They haven't. You cannot prove that
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
Anson, it's the same reason why I brought up physical explanations instead of delving too much into the metaphysics, is because even in the physical realm, if we take metaphysics out of it, you still sit with a problem. As Ivan has also said, it's the mathematics of it, it's varying species. It's, if you talk to anybody who actually studies animals, conserving species, all of this, I mean, at some point,
I'm
with,
not.
if you
So
don't, you can't just have one and one animal and produce generations from it. You would require genetic diversity, otherwise it's inbreeding.
yeah.
So even
So
on just these concepts,
you can't. I don't think it's possible to, using empirical methods, to prove the origin of life with specificity that is required in an argument in which you are talking about creation. It requires philosophy, because you're talking about something that is it's not answerable through secular scientific means. You can get closer to the answer, you can find out additional information, but in terms of an argument for a creator being evolution or natural processes in the universe, you have to attack it the same way that the theists do in arguing their position. And so that's why I didn't want to go down the physical route, because then you just get into worshiping science as some sort of religion when it's empirical in nature, and not suited to the task.
Yeah, yeah. So why would we hold a theory that is not provable, or unproven at least, and that requires faulty methods like empiricism, because empiricism itself is quite faulty.
Yeah.
Why would we hold it as a truth when at best it's a theory? It's a theory that goes against truth that we already know. And not only that, it is implausible in mathematical terms. Let's do another thought experiment. um,
Yep.
when you the idea that a new species can emerge is requires, let's say, in sexual animals, it requires that two at least two different animals evolve at the same time. And if you say, well, this is not needed because the
it can't
whole group.
even, that's why I brought that up. It can't even just be two, because that is not enough genetic diversity already by itself. So you're now already entering mathematical problems.
Exactly. If you don't need, um if you don't need to, because you've got plenty, because the whole population was mutating towards a certain direction, then the question would be, how much time do you need for that population that is moving along together, changing together, to become mutually, let's say, um, mutually incompatible with its ancestors? You need way more than millions of years, way more. And the question is, where do we have those? Where do we have those
Yeah,
things?
and for physical progression of genotypes, not even phenotypes. I mean, the time frame required for those leaps in changes is immense. That's why they've never actually been able to answer this. And Anson, this is why this is also an important part of this, because evolution is supposed to be the science, but then when we appeal to the science, you guys just enter murky territory of unexplained numbers and adding
Yeah,
millions of years. And
yeah, yeah. I agree that the science is a good tool for trying to find the truth, but it's not science is not the pursuit of truth, right? Which is why I tried to like I said again, make it to a philosophical argument instead of a describing the nuts and bolts of how all of the evolution occurred, because I don't think that with like I said, there's probably like 8 people on the planet that are qualified to do that, and I'm not one of them. And even they're faulty because they don't know everything. You can't make that argument because science isn't the harbinger of truth. It's
but
just a
see,
tool.
then there's the failure in evolution itself, is
Uh,
proposing to be the science while they're not abiding by science is a contradiction on itself and defeating already.
well, no, it's an acknowledgement of the imperfection of human knowledge.
I mean, you can frame it in a fancy way, but it
No, no,
doesn't
no, no. I'm sorry. I'm
fix
sorry.
it.
This is completely backwards. This is completely backwards. You're doing exactly the same thing you did to Jim Bob. It's like you're saying first of all you're stating a belief, and then like you're casting the stone, and then you're hiding your hand. No, man, you don't get to have it both ways. You cannot say it's knowledge and also that it isn't knowledge and that it's somehow that is exactly the
Well,
scientific move. It's
That's
like
the
no, no, you
contradiction.
don't know. You don't know.
well,
So
yeah.
why
So I'm
say
not. I'm not a scientist or a secularist, right? So I don't agree that science is the truth and science is the knowledge. It's a tool. It's like a process used to try and come up with answers to questions. It's not the harbinger of all knowledge.
well, what is knowledge? First of all, let's start with something basic. What is knowledge?
What is knowledge? You're gonna ask me a tough question, man. What is knowledge? I guess knowledge is a result of the um, ability of a object to observe its environment and use logic and reason. It's the complexity of the mind interacting with the remainder of the environment. Knowledge is the
Knowledge is a
summation.
collection of inputs.
Yeah, it's well, yeah, but knowledge in and of
Yeah,
itself
it's
is
accumulation of
irrelevant.
inputs. That's what
Yeah,
it boils down to in the simplest
without
form.
So
context, it's useless though. I mean,
so
it is autistic knowledge, knowledge that is just knowledge in and of itself, but without context and understanding, it's worthless.
It's a collection
well,
of inputs that is reviewed or observed by the mind.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. That's a good definition. I like that definition.
well,
Yeah.
I think that that view of knowledge is very reductive. By that definition, then AI knows. Any machine that discerns, that does the
Yeah.
act of discernment, knows. So now the question is,
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a mind of its own to assess the collection of inputs. It would require still a mind of a human to program the AI, because AI doesn't exist as an independent mind. So it
Not
wouldn't
yet.
be exactly the same.
yeah, yeah, I completely agree, Chris. But for argument's sake, like Anson said that it's an object knowing, and I would say no, no, no. Subjects are the one who knows, who know. Like objects are known, subjects know, and knowledge is intimately tied. It's a fundamentally spiritual and mystical process of union. Knowledge is union. So you know, spiritually speaking, and knowledge is communion. Knowledge is union, in the sense of two things meeting for a purpose. Now, True knowledge is a meeting for a purpose that is true, and false knowledge is a knowledge, but is a knowledge that goes to the other direction. Now, if you think there's something as abstract knowledge, then you're not being able to discern if it's true knowledge or if it's false knowledge. You can have
Right.
two people in a football match, and one of them is playing by the rules, and the other one is breaking the rules. And the one that's breaking the rules doesn't know that they're breaking the rules. Do they know how to play football? They're knowing something. Like I can perceive that they interpret meaning in some form, but it's wrong. Like they're not understanding it, so they don't have knowledge of how to play football. So by that standard, when we're talking about knowledge, science cannot know. It literally cannot know, because to know implies a teleological purpose. You
Yes.
have to start with a purpose.
To know implies knowing.
Yeah, well, and this is all going back to the concept conversation we were having earlier, because knowledge, it's it's both physical and immaterial. It's both, because knowledge in and of itself is just stored data in the mind, right? But without the immaterial ability to create the concepts of what the knowledge means, it's just useless
Knowledge
data.
isn't
You can store,
physical,
you can
Anson. Knowledge isn't physical. You can't point to knowledge.
well,
So
no,
that
but the data component you can.
no, well, you can't. If I show you a motherboard, can you point to me where the X-rated movie is located, or on the hard drive? Can you point to it? No, you can't. Still, it doesn't even apply in that sense.
Yeah, the idea that the knowledge is completely material is wrong, because
Well, yeah, it's not
you have
completely
to.
material. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
claim that it is.
yeah. I'm not saying you're saying that. What I'm saying is that knowledge cannot be either ideal or material. It has to be both. It necessarily has to be both, and it requires a code. You have to be able to decode the
Yeah.
information, because and that act of interpretation is already mystical. So
Yeah,
the the reply I would give to Anson, to your definition of knowledge, is that it is inherently an enlightenment view of knowledge that is already disembodied, in a sense, even though you might say it is material, or that it is both material and ideal. Performatively, you're treating knowledge as an internal gnostic,
Yeah.
yeah, as an internal affair. And knowledge is not internal. Knowledge is participative. Like you have to participate in
yes,
knowledge. You don't, like, you don't get to coast by talking about the football match. You have to play the match. If you don't play the
yes.
match, then you don't know how to play. You can tell the
It comes
rules.
down to theoretical knowledge and practical knowledge, or as a definition.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. That's what I mean when I say knowledge. And in that sense, science cannot know. It really cannot know. Now,
Well, I agree that science is ill-equipped to know the nature of the creation of life, but it is not ill-equipped to provide better answers toward pointing toward what that truth could
better,
be.
better. Why are you using value language? Better. That also requires a standard. How do you know the standard? That's the question. That's why we tend to go to the epistemological and the gnosiological, and we ask what is knowledge. Like, to 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 ask the question presupposes a standard. So what is the standard, and how do we know the standard? What is true?
The history of the knowledge. Knowledge, if I were to treat it like an object, which it is, it's an object of the mind, then there is a history of
No, but the
knowledge.
mind is not even physical. So how can it be? You're saying a physical thing is comes from something that is non-physical, which is it, dude. It just boils down to a DVD is pointless without the player to play the DVD. You're not gonna get around that, though.
Yeah, but we are the player and the DVD, because we are the environment.
Yeah, but you need the non-physical thing, as in knowledge, to knowledge is required. Otherwise, you're just looking at data or information. You need something to assess that data and information, which then facilitates knowledge,
Right.
Yeah. Right.
i.e., a mind or a source of assessing the input or the data.
Yeah, and that's just the evolutionary history that is ingrained inside of me as an object that allows me to do that.
No, no, no. You're presupposing that you can know that simply by being exposed to reality, you can know that you can interpret correctly the world as you are because you're already equipped with everything that you need to interpret reality. Where is the proof of that? You're already starting from a very satanic presupposition that is
Yeah. Oh,
that is
yeah. No, I'm very well aware that my position is prideful. You don't have to explain that to
no,
me
no,
in
no.
order
But
to make
I'm
that
not trying
assertion.
to. I'm not trying to insult you. I'm simply
No, no,
describing
I understand. I'm acknowledging that you're correct. It's
like
the pride of knowledge. I know what it is.
it's but it's fundamentally, let's say, the anthropology. You're using the anthropology of the Enlightenment, and you're not seeing its faults, because the Enlightenment, among other things, said that you have the capacity to think all of the thoughts, right? You can pick and choose. That's what free thinking is. Free thinking is, I'm going to get better results if only I'm free to think whatever I want without constraints from the outside, because that is the way that I reach truth. So
No, that's not the way that I'm thinking though,
no, no, but
because
let me
I'm
finish.
adding time.
But let me finish. Do you have infinite time? And even if you had infinite time, let's put it this way: the postmoderns made an argument that is super good to illustrate what I think is the fatal flaw of what you're presupposing at a nosological level, which is, you need the starting presupposition to be correct, because everything changes everything else. Like, you cannot know the other person if you cannot know the other person completely. So that the postmoderns argue you can never know the other person because you can never know the other person completely. Now, I don't agree with their let's say, with their ultimate metaphysical concept, but their argument is good enough to tell you, in order to know the truth by your standard, you would need to know all of reality. Because if you missed a part of reality, then you would potentially be missing part of the interpretative key that you need to interpret reality. So your position actually requires access to everything, which is
Yeah.
why it leads to dataism, which leads to having to calculate everything and let's say, account for everything. Now, since that is technically, physically impossible, then by that standard, your nosological path is already doomed to fail. And it requires to assess and assert truth, and then not take responsibility for it, because it requires that to move forward. And that is the pattern that I see in scientism, the pattern that I see in evolutionary thought, the pattern that I see in this Enlightenment anthropology that views knowledge in a certain way. That's why um, it
Yeah.
ends up making truth into a never changing thing, because what I say now has to be, let's say, both affirmed and at the same time relativized in order for me to keep on asserting it. And to me, from my perspective, from my frame of view, that's exactly what the Antichrist did. That's literally what the beast
Yeah.
in the apocalypse does. It's like, it's, you can chop my head off, but I can still regrow my own head, which is basically solipsism in the end.
No, and
Yeah.
and the things that you're saying actually make a whole lot of sense, and I wrestle with those quite a bit, but more on the outcome based side because I see what the result is of many people in the culture believing the thing that I believe, and it's disastrous because they think that they have the knowledge to know everything, and they can't, and so they come to all these bizarre conclusions about what is and isn't true, and that is absolutely a flaw in the system, and I don't know how to reconcile it.
The biggest problem that this boils down to is in thinking knowledge is subjective and not objective.
No, I don't think it's subjective though.
Exactly, because that would be false. That would be incorrect.
Yeah.
But that's what it boils down to is this, as you were saying, with what the trends you're seeing in society
Yeah.
is tending towards people thinking that knowledge is subjective and not
Yeah.
objective.
Yeah, it's because so many people have that relativistic point of view about ideas and concepts, and it's disastrous. But when you get beyond the relativism and go beyond what you see in the arguments that I'm making, I'm adding time and history and trying to piece together the items of the perfect knowledge that aren't capable of being pieced together, and trying to put concepts in places where they belong, right? And it's extremely difficult to do and come up with any kind of coherent argument.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that it's not a correct way to try and interpret the universe, because it's
Well,
flawed, because I'm imperfect, and therefore the output and input collection mechanisms will be imperfect.
yeah, well, but that's the fundamental issue. You're basically trusting your own biases and expecting others to trust your biases when you're not willing to trust or acknowledge that you're doing a faith move. That
Oh no,
you're
I am. I'm acknowledging that. I'm I'm acknowledging that. I'm not going to deny that. That's that's silly.
Well, how are you supposed then to, in your finite human lifespan, contain all of the information that you need in order to, let's say, ascend the mountain of knowledge by yourself?
Well, you can't do it by yourself. And you can't ascend it. Even the most, I guess from y'all's perspective and my perspective, no Christian could have perfect knowledge either. Perfect knowledge is not attainable, not even by
Well,
Christians.
it depends what you mean by knowledge. Like perfect knowledge of what? Like you can be a saint, for example. Saints in so far as they're being saintly have perfect knowledge. That doesn't mean omniscience. Those are not the same thing. Like you're supposed, if you start from the presupposition that human beings are limited, but there can be some perfection in that limitedness, then you don't need to actually know everything. You just need to know what you need to know, and that is enough. And the rest, you can trust others. You can trust God. You can trust the rest of the people who are in your communion. So that's actually what the church is.
The
Honestly, that
Yeah,
perfection in the limited is the image of God.
yeah, no, and I'm not going to argue against the benefits of pointing to a God to make sense of the universe. That's a very logical thing for a human to do. Um, but that doesn't make it the best method of interpreting what the universe is. Some
well,
people are
Uh,
incapable of thinking. Some people are incapable of thinking beyond the relativism, and for
Hey
those
man, if you
people,
go open Razor and you go, oh, how did all of this happen? God. Isn't that the pretty simple, concise explanation for it all, huh?
right, right,
This is the science.
simplicity doesn't imply correctness.
Well, it is a correlation to what's the most likely though. So even if I want to use scientific arguments for this, it's still going to bolster um, uh, uh, the entailment being God at the end of the day.
Yeah,
well, Anson, I would pick a different route to justify why God is actually the best way to ground knowledge, and I would say because any other way, and this is this is the transcendental argument for God. The any other way is absurd because it fundamentally cuts you off from the source of knowledge. Like it will always end up being a fake kind of knowledge. So in that sense, it's like you're giving us, let's say, a secondary source instead of the primary source, without noticing that the secondary source can be corrupted. And
yeah,
that secondary source is ironically always mediated through you as an individual. So what I would question is, why would we start from the presupposition that only individuals know, when actually I could argue that the gnosiology, the way that the ancients understood knowledge, was fundamentally social. So if knowledge is not an individual process, so if it's not about you and your brain and your own, let's say, imagination, if knowledge is actually about how we work in the world, then knowledge is not let's say an intellectual pursuit. It's not a presuppositional thing. It's actually a performative thing. Do you know how to have a community correctly? And I would say the kind of anthropology you're using already leads to the individualism that you see corrupting society.
No, no, I view those objects like Christianity and all of the other religions as features, the objects that are within the complexity of the human society as an object, right? So all of human society is a thing, and those objects evolved for a purpose because most people aren't capable of thinking past the relativism, and when they organize in their cultures, they need that higher power to point to.
Why would they
And
need
I'm
that?
using my satanic pride here again to say that I can have that knowledge in and of myself, and it not be perfect, and acknowledge that it's not perfect, but that it is the best that I have.
How would you know if it's good knowledge if you don't have an ultimate standard for what is good knowledge?
Right. Yeah, and using those laws of logic and objective measurement.
No, then that is your own God. You're saying
Yeah, that
basically
yes,
my own
yeah, and
standards are the standards of truth.
right, and my own standards are objective though, because the laws of logic are objective.
No,
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 Yeah, they
no.
are.
no,
Well,
that's
I think,
fallacy.
yeah, I think you're presupposing that you're a perfectly rational being, and
Oh
that's the
no,
wrong
absolutely.
anthropology
That's
that
what.
I'm.
No, I'm not perfectly rational. I'm presupposing that most people aren't capable of a higher level of thinking that would enable them to move beyond religion and beyond the relativism
Again,
into the space that I'm in.
higher. You're talking about higher. Where is
Right.
your standard outside of? You're saying you have to think like me, because if you don't think like me, then you're a primitive ape. That's
Right.
literally what Darwin was saying.
Right.
You're imbibing the philosophy of Darwinism without being able to defend it, which is basically you have to be perfectly rational, because me, an enlightened person from the Enlightenment, which is about, I don't know, 500 years old, I'm superior to everyone else because I can think for myself. And you weaklings, you need to get on with the program, because you have flaws in yourself, but I don't, because I'm
No.
reasonable.
No.
Where is
I'm
that
saying that
perfectly reasonable person?
no. I'm
Where's
not
the perfect
perfectly
logic?
reasonable. Absolutely not. I'm not making that assertion. I'm making the assertion that those Enlightenment thinkers have their own place, and it's similar to the same place that the Christians hold. Right? They were just pursuing the truth using the best tools that they had, but there are better tools now to pursue the
How do
truth.
you know if they're better tools? Or you have to start
Yeah.
with a standard. You say they had these tools and they were better. How do you know if they're better or worse? I think they're worse. I think
Yeah.
their anthropology is worse. I can argue why it's worse. I think they don't know what a human being is. They don't know the relationship between the human being and the creator. And the fact that
Right.
they're wrong then ripples down in the way they live and the way they think. So in that sense, I would say, why would I take the presupposition of that anthropology?
Right, and you
Especially,
shouldn't. You shouldn't, because the Enlightenment thinkers were inherently flawed, and had, a significant amount of hubris in their belief that they could be the arbiter of what is and isn't true. But what I'm saying is that acknowledging that Enlightenment thought is flawed, but it has its own place, and that there are people who can ascend past the Enlightenment thought and into even past the postmodernism nonsense. You can ascend past that and recognize that Christianity has a very large amount of value, and that it
Well,
shouldn't disappear because
Anson,
it's needed.
Anson, I think Peugeot would be having a stroke if he was hearing you speak, because you keep using value words, better, worse, like you need a standard for what's good
Right.
for you to be able to meaningfully use that language. It's like
Right. And
you seem to be standing above all of religion, all of the
yeah,
different traditions, and you becoming the judge of which one is good and which one is bad. And I'm
that's
asking
exactly what
you,
I'm doing.
why are you the authority? Why would you
See,
presuppose?
the problem is it all, every time the basic conclusion to this whole discussion will boil down to the ego. And that's why you say you see the importance in Christianity or religion is it is that purpose of making you break these ties to your own personal ego, i.e., being your own God, because
Right.
that is when you, if you fundamentally get trapped there, the you need to claw your way out of that hole, because that is the
Right.
entrapment that, or the situation you're finding yourself in, is that struggle with your own internal ego.
Right. And I acknowledge that in order to get out of basically the self-serving trap that you're describing, you have to appeal internally, at least, to some sort of objective truth. And the only kinds of objective truths that are created are the ones in deontological philosophical systems, like what y'all have. And so, in order for me to be able to make value judgments, I have to appeal to your value system. I'm aware of that.
Yeah, basically, that you see how you're getting that entailment, how
Yeah. Yeah.
if you take the logical path, that's where it ends up is.
Yeah. And I acknowledge that. I've considered myself to be a Christian ethicist who happens to not believe in God for a very long time.
Well, the thing with the deontology that you said is that, um, actually the term deontology comes from the Enlightenment.
Yeah.
Like, you
It's
you
Kant.
can, yeah, it's Kant. So like the question would be, why would we stick to that anthropology? Like the whole Western idealist tradition, the whole German idealism is already rooted within Protestantism. Like
Yeah.
if you take the history of ideas, like you can see the development of those ideas working out through history. Now the question is, why would I pick this one over, I don't know, one that was 2,000 years older? Like, why wouldn't I choose a patristic commentary on the Bible over, why wouldn't I choose, I don't know, Saint Maximus the Confessor over Kant? And the problem with Kant is that he already starts from a presupposition that is already dialectic, in the sense of it's either pure reason or not pure reason. It's like, why would we start from that anthropology? Like,
Right.
he's already he's fighting against something that is already not true. He's critiquing pure reason, because why? Because a couple of people from his intellectual, let's say, from his intellectual time period, thought that that was possible. Okay, fair enough. But what is a human being? It's not enough to
Well,
say there's.
yeah, yeah, and the only way to derive that is through the ethics of Christianity and the related human dignity. I'm not denying that your ethical structure isn't superior and
No, no,
capable of
no.
answering those questions.
I'm not talking about ethics. I'm talking ethics comes way downstream. It's super low ethics. Like, first, before ethics, we have metaphysics, we have ontology. What is
Right,
before ethics? And before metaphysics and ontology, we have epistemology. How do we know what we know?
right,
Like, how do we know our metaphysics is correct? But if you flip that, if you put first the ethics and then the metaphysics that would fit the ethics, and then the epistemology, that will lead to insanity. That will lead to utter insanity. Now, that's actually what's happening right now. Like, the wokes are doing that
Oh,
basically. It's like,
yeah, yeah.
so
No,
so
I've seen that. Yeah, it's awful. Yeah.
yeah, now that's why we want to talk about how do we know what we know, and it's a difficult question. Even within different, let's say, Christian sects, there's not a let's say a definite um agreement, and it has caused a lot of problems. In fact, I would say that the separation between Catholics and Orthodox has to do with that issue. Like, we Orthodox think that what the Catholic did when they changed the creed, when they added the filioque, we think that that fundamentally changed gnoseology. So Catholicism is more like a Neoplatonic system, while Orthodoxy is not. It's a non-dualist system. So if you're talking about, let's say, metaphysics, you have to first talk about epistemology. And if we don't get to talk about epistemology, then all we're going to do is going to, like, be telling our own stories, and you think your story is better, I think my story is better. That does not solve the problem. We're not talking at the same level. So that's why we need transcendental argumentation to show us, like, what we can know for certain. and
Right.
and and that's where I see the whole Enlightenment project failing. It has utterly failed. So
No,
and it
yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, the Enlightenment has had a horrible outcome in terms of the end result and the number of people that have followed it. I'm not gonna deny that. But um, I mean, if you want to have the conversation about how you know what you know, it's the I got to go back to the damn evolution and reference that, and then have the same conversation again. And I don't want to do the same damn thing over again.
No.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and say if any of you three want to give final thoughts, closing thoughts, and then we will transition and we're going to do a raid of Nadim because he's doing an after party. So if you guys want to do closing thoughts, then we'll transition and say goodbye.
You're right. Well, let me start, I guess, left to right. Thank you, W, for Mr. Westford. Thank you so much for hosting us. And Anson, I appreciate it. We rescheduled a couple of times, but thank you so much for having it. You're always funny in chat, and you seem like a good dude. So I figured this would be a worthwhile discussion, even if I have some badly mashed together arguments. If it helps in some way, then I felt obligated to do it. So all the best to you, dude.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and thank you, Chris. You provided me with excellent stimulation, and the conversation was, respectful, and I do want to say, because I know this is an Orthodox sphere channel. I'm going to liturgy tomorrow in the morning, and I've actually got a few times in the last couple of months because I find the experience to be beneficial. And I don't know how I could possibly describe my satanic prideful points of view in a better way than I have, but I'll continue trying to formulate them. Thank you so much, Ivan,
Right.
for breaking some of that down.
Awesome. And also, I won though. I won though. Just putting that out there. I won. I smashed. Fatality.
Okay. Thank you guys for the very stimulating conversation. Thank you, Mr. Westford, for putting it together. And like, glory to God, Anson, that you're at least that you're brave enough to go into these spaces that are very alien to you, and that you're humble enough to recognize your own fallibility. Because honestly, like, nobody here, I think, is achieved sainthood yet. So, like, kudos to you, man. Like, keep going, Chris. Like, dig the mustache. I think the arguments presented are super good, and that I hope that this leads to, let's say, more fruitful thoughts and conversations that can lead to inner spiritual transformation. So thank you, Mr. Westford, for having us, and thank you, Anson, for being so patient with me for because I'm a bit forceful sometimes, and thank you, Chris, for all your charitable, let's say, or all your charitable arguments. So thank you, guys.
All right. So Nadim is hosting a after party. And if any of you guys want to hop on, and I don't know if he's going to continue the debate or do what he's doing, let's check in now. And looks like he's dancing. Nadim, what are you doing? This is not the ending I expected, but I guess it's the ending we deserve. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it, dude. That's it, man. Oh yeah, man. That's the vibe. Vibe, man. Vibe. Good, dude. Come on. I know that nonsense. All about the vibe. Do it. Come on, man. Feel it. All about it. All about it.